What you guys do this weekend?
Everything. What'd you do this weekend?
Not what you did.
Yeah,
JT never recovers.
When JT threw that text or that message in Slack, like Sunday at 11:18 a.m., they're like, "Guess what, guys? I'm hammered," or whatever. I'm like, yeah, we're shocked.
Oh, I was too. Like, so the tournament wasn't until Sunday. We went to the lake on Friday, and we did it upright. A little pre-gaming. Went
Shocking.
to the strip most of the day on Saturday. I did the worm.
The dance move?
Pretty sure, yeah.
He said
You think?
He said he thought he did
I
the
was-
worm. He
I
said he
was all
woke
over
up
that
and his
dance
body
floor.
was sore.
I'm
No.
telling you, like, I'm gonna need new shoes. I think I wore the soles out on these babies.
You're a mess, man.
Oh no,
Oh.
we took like 5 teams down, and yeah, it took a couple days to recover from that.
You're gonna need to start drinking again after that Tyreek Hill trade today.
I know. Can you believe that? Wow.
What?
Hey, we got a pile of.
Wes
picks.
doesn't even know.
Oh,
The
yeah.
Chiefs traded Tyreek Hill, dude, to the Dolphins.
What?
Yep.
Oh man, I bet there are some people
Well,
in
but
red and
we got-
yellow today that
We
are
got it
bent.
like first, second, fifth this year or something like that, and then fourth and sixth next year. That's a lot, man.
It's a
And
lot,
he got-
man. But
He got one of the biggest, or he got the biggest contract for like wide receiver in the history of the NFL. It's crazy.
Well, that's exciting.
It's gonna be wild, man. But
Yeah, on a crap
the arms
team.
race in that division, they're gonna need to get somebody to replace them like ASAP.
Yep.
Oh, we got to talk a little bit about TX2K. I didn't put that anywhere on these notes. Golly, I had a great conversation with Seth Angel from Houston Raceway Park yesterday, and why did I not put that anywhere in the notes? I think we maybe, as soon as we talk about Midwest Drag Racing Series, let's talk a little bit about TX2K. Can you remind me?
Yep. All right, guys, let's get this started. What do you say?
The Wes Buck Show.
It's uncut, it's unfiltered. This is the show of shows. This is the biggest names in drag racing. No holds barred.
Speaking his mind.
I've never had a problem expressing my opinions, but what we're doing here is bigger than that. These are conversations that need to be had in an unfiltered way.
Exploring hot topics.
Drag racing's all I've ever done. It's all I care to do.
And spreading the gospel of drag racing.
I respect the history. I appreciate how far we've come, but I want more for this sport, and I'll fight for it. This is the great American motorsport, drag racing.
The Wes Buck Show starts in 3, 2, 1.
Hey gang, Wes Buck here, Drag Illustrated Magazine checking in. It is Wednesday, March 23rd, 2022. We hope you're doing well, safe, sound, and everything in between. We are fresh off a wild weekend in the sport of drag racing. We had the Midwest Drag Racing Series Extreme Texas Nationals take place this past weekend at Extreme Raceway Park. We also had Texas 2K. We've got all sorts of drag racing coming up in the next couple of days. We got Funny Car Chaos Classic 60 plus funny cars converging here on the Texas Motorplex outside of Dallas. We got tons of stuff going on. We're going to have a special guest today, Corey Mahalik, top alcohol dragster superstar, A-Fuel superstar, video prodigy, I think is a safe definition.
Oh, absolutely.
Video visionary, maybe.
Yeah.
We're going to really pump this up. We're going to have this guy
that goes
sold.
on a T-shirt right there.
Yeah,
He's going to make
visionary.
us look bad, you know, with
He
all
is
his
going to make
lighting
us
and
look
stuff.
bad.
Yeah.
Like, why is JT so much louder than me? I just feel
He's
like
not.
I'm getting. No, I'm
I'm
just
not.
messing with you guys. I'm a little sensitive.
I
Hey,
project my
JT,
voice.
I made him turn his mic down to like the lowest level possible.
I said, hey, this is where it's been marked on the mixer for like 10 years. And Mike's like, can you turn that down a little bit? Like, you're a little loud. You're really coming in over top of us last week. So anyways, welcome to the show, guys. Excited to have you. As always, please smash that subscribe button if you're watching along on YouTube. Make sure you hit that little bell so you get notified every time we go live. If you're watching on Facebook, welcome. Click share, click like, all those things. And most importantly, I say it every week, but it can't be overstated. Your involvement makes all the difference in the show. Every episode, we like to wait toward the end and take your questions. So if you have something you want to say, or if you have something you want to touch on or discuss with us, please throw it into the comments and we will get to it as soon as we possibly can. We've got a lot of ground here to cover, guys. I think we might as well get right into it. How about the
Good.
Midwest Drag Racing Series this past weekend? I know everybody gets excited. We talk about it all the time, the momentum and the enthusiasm and the energy that exists early in the season, right? We had it. I think that's the reason everybody was willing to buy plywood and swim across the pits in Gainesville, because you're just still excited. Things are getting started. Your stuff's still in good shape. You're not broke yet. You haven't had too many trials and tribulations, right? It's early in the season, and I think we anticipated a lot of enthusiasm heading into the Midwest Drag Racing Series season opener. But I'll be honest, I don't know that I expected 27, nearly 30 pro mods. I think there were 29 on the property, 27 made passes. Really, really, really strong start to the season for the Midwest Drag Racing Series. A bunch of cars in the 350s, which we were going to discuss here in the next couple of minutes. Dustin Neslony taking the win, is his first career win on asphalt after a career spent in boat racing. Really excited, fresh face on the Midwest Series.
Boat guys, man.
Isn't that the case, right? I mean, over in the NHRA Pro Mod Series, we got the new Mike Janis car that's a helicopter pilot. Now we got boat racers, tractor pullers. They're all. Is that a good sign?
Yeah, I think it is actually. I forgot. Yeah, Stan Shelton coming over from tractor pulling. He had a heck of a showing at the Midwest deal too. So a lot of these guys are really getting their feet underneath them.
What do you make of all these cars dipping in? I mean, I say all these cars, and I think we have to be pretty specific about it. 3 of the new cars that arrived on the scene at the Midwest Drag Racing Series, dipping into 350. Stan Shelton with the aforementioned Stan Shelton with his screw-blown Pro Mod Camaro out of the Pro Line camp.
Mustang.
Also, Mustang. Daniel Ferris as well with a Pro-charged car out of the Pro Line camp. The aforementioned Dustin Neslony that won the event. He dipped into the 350s with a Pro-charger car out of the Pro Line camp. You know, Mike, you've fought this battle alongside your dad, the godfather of Pro Mod, Charles Carpenter. Do you relate to the battle that some of these guys are preparing to face, the guys who have been part of that Midwest Series for the last few years, when you get some of these? And everybody gets super sensitive about this, and I'm not trying to call anybody out or say anybody's better than anyone else. But I do think there's some truth to the fact that, what did Nate say the other day, our editor-in-chief, as the great American poet Meek Mill once said, there's levels to this shit, right? I mean, and I think that exists in drag racing, and you've got some really high-level teams that have infiltrated the Midwest Drag Racing Series, and I'm anxious to see how everybody reacts to it.
I think that's the problem that these regional series face. I think that they come about in large part to give guys that don't run the national series, that don't run NHRA Pro Mod, maybe even don't run PDRA, give them a place to race. And then when, as you said, infiltrated by these high level cars, it sort of resets the deck. However, sort of running counter to that, I think the weather was a big factor in what we saw this weekend, and the fact that it was the first race. I think that we're early in the season. PDRA has not started up yet. We've had one NHRA Pro Mod race. I think these guys are looking for a place to race. I'll be curious to see how many of these cars follow the series all year for points. And
me too.
And what happens when we start to see hot summer conditions, when we start to see races on top of other events, and where people choose to go.
Let's touch on that, because
I'm trying not to overreact to it too much, but
we are going to see a rule change
concerning.
though. Don't you agree? Like, I mean, I heard about it before the season started, that the Midwest Drag Racing Series kind of powers that be were making it known that, hey, we recognize that our rules compared to many of the other, primarily like the Snowbird Outlaw Nationals rule set, kind of what is quickly becoming the go-to Outlaw Pro Mod rule set, that they were a little light on their Pro Charger combination. Mm-hmm. I dove into this a little bit, and one of the discussions that I had was basically that the Midwest Drag Racing Series didn't want to write rules prematurely. They didn't want to slow down or address a problem that they didn't have yet, right? Because they didn't have anybody in their series that was necessarily running away with it with the Pro Charger combination.
And they would be addressing it before they even had their first race.
Exactly. So they had to let it happen almost, right? However, I have heard a lot of chatter in the last 72 hours or so, the last couple of days, that a rule change is coming. And I'm anxious to see how they handle this, because I think you make a really good point. You can throw all this out the window come June in St. Louis.
Right.
Or June at Great Bend, when you've got some
any
elevation.
Other time. We saw, I think I didn't have boots on the ground or know exactly what the weather conditions were there, but I think that they won't see that again this year until either the very last race of the season or the start of next season. So it's hard to react to it right away, but it's certainly concerning as far as the parity on all these combinations. And I think that series, especially, we've seen some real hitters with turbo combinations over there. And I think that would be the main concern for me. I think we saw some nitrous cars hang in there.
Hanging with a 365. I mean,
Yeah.
that was the nitrous record, I believe, for the Midwest
Right.
Series. He stepped up. I will say that I'm excited to see some of these guys elevate their game, because you will see a certain amount of that. I'll never forget when Billy Glidden showed up on the scene in what was then a very popular category, ADRL Extreme 10.5. It was the ADRL's kind of outlaw, no holds barred version of 10.5W racing. And Billy Glidden had all this success in NMRA, NMCA. He was a legend, right? Is the son of Bob Glidden, raced in pro stock, has all this experience and all this knowledge, a really a notorious rule book racer, right? A guy that always had a car that really fit a certain segment of the rules, super lightweight, small block Ford, nitrous, every advantage that he could find inside the rules.
Pro stock car, right? An ex Mark Powick GTO.
Yeah. Then it became a Mustang, I believe. At one point, they changed bodies
on
it.
Remember, he rolled it in Topeka, I think, something like that, and then he re-skinned it as a Mustang.
I believe that's right. Yeah, I think that's exactly right. And an axle broke or something at Topeka, and he ended up putting a Ford Mustang body on it. So,
which made
God bless him. Yeah, somebody had to put a Ford Mustang body on something. Anyways, but I remember when Billy Glidden showed up in ADRL Extreme 10.5, and it immediately, everybody was running 430s, let's say. I mean, I believe most of the field, Steve Kirk Jr., Mike Hill, David Janes, a lot of the guys, Spiro Pappas, a lot of the people that were front runners. What's Kenny? I'm drawing blank on his name. You would know it. 63 Corvette. Kenny Neese. There was a slew of guys that were all in that 430, 440 range consistently.
This was pre Dan Millen, right? This was pre
Alanabi Dan Millen, right?
Maybe I gave away the end of the story.
Well, no, but Billy Glidden came in and his stuff's going like 420s and immediately. And everybody, it was cool to see the way the class reacted, because a lot of people were saying the same things that we're saying today, that, oh, here he comes. He's going to ruin it. He's going to win the championship and run away with it. And he did kick some ass and take some names, no doubt about it. But everybody's program ultimately benefited, I think, from his presence. And I do think it's going to be, that's part of it, right? That's the curse of heads up drag racing, is it's so hard to write rules that are going to take
parity
these things.
Is an illusion. In heads up drag racing with multiple combinations, parity is an illusion. And if you achieve it, even for a short period, just know that it's only going to last that short period.
Right.
It's
and
always
I think
changing.
You maintaining the illusion is really what you have to focus on, because are you really going to nail it? I don't think so, because there's so many factors that come into play, how hard you're willing to run your stuff. That was the conversation that I've had with a lot of racers the last few days. I wanted to know, like, whenever I see one of those 358, 357 runs, are you running the rods out of this thing? Is there more left in it? And I talked to a multitude of racers. They're running these things on the ragged edge. And if you look at like the short times, for instance, when Daniel Ferris went 356, that thing went 909 down low, 909, 238 to the middle in a 356. So you can't say that they're like soft and then just running it hard out the back. That thing's, I don't know that you can run a car any more aggressively than that, a suspended door slammer. So, I mean, you can't say that they're not getting after it. I mean, they're seriously getting after it. But I looked some of the difference. Aaron Wells, a regular in the Midwest Drag Racing Series, a former champion of the Midwest Drag Racing Series, a real high class. He was a world beater in the Midwest Drag Racing Series. I believe he went a career best 362. And the difference really is in that short time. He went 938 down low. So what we're going to see is some of these Midwest guys that have been a part of the series for a long time, they're going to have to get a little more aggressive down low, right? I mean, but is the track going to even allow that anywhere else in the world? Because I heard it from a multitude of people that the surface provided by Clyde Scott, Galen Smith and company at Extreme Raceway Park this past weekend was the best track they'd ever raced on in their life. So you can pretty much, it's tough because that's an anomaly, right? They're not
a lot of variables. We'll have to see the next race or two how it shakes out. But hey, healthy independent regional pro mod series, we're all for that here, and it was good to see those guys have a hell of an event to start the season.
I surely think so. Do you think that that's what we talked for about a half hour last week about the status, the future, the place that the NHRA Pro Mod Drag Racing Series currently occupies in our sport. Would you agree that part of the issue that they face is there are so many incredible opportunities, so many incredible options for racers right now? I mean, Midwest
100%.
Pro Mod Series, 10,000 to win. You got the PDRA putting up, I think, like 10,000 or 7,500 to win in 2 different Pro Mod categories, 8-10 times a year. You've got NMCA Extreme Pro Mod. You've got Northeast Outlaw, really strong right now. Had a great year last year, looking really good, extremely competitive. There's a lot of options, and it's funny because, and this is something that would be fun to spin a little bit on, is that part of the magic? Is because sometimes I've had this moment where I go, man, sometimes I feel like we want more for Pro Mod. Like, we want Pro Mod to be top fuel way more than Pro Mod wants to be top fuel, right? Like,
I think that's some of what they're facing in NHRA, to be honest with you. I think that is the Pro Mod mentality, and I think it thrives in these regional and smaller series. And then when you take it to the highest level there, and it's the chicken dance, or playing chicken with each other. Who's going to make the move, to commit, I guess, and take that next step. And Pro Mod kind of always has this gunslinger outlaw mentality that you can't seem to shake. So it almost seems like it's better suited for that type of series.
I spoke to Keith Haney, the president of the Midwest Drag Racing Series, this morning, and Keith, he made some really good points about, man, it's nice to be able to race Friday and Saturday, be home with my family, or on Sunday morning. Right. I mean, he made mention of the fact that, like, hey, I got to go race and do what I'm passionate about all weekend, Friday and Saturday. And Sunday I was at home riding horses with my wife, doing what she wants to do. And we all know that, like, that's an important part of this whole ecosystem. And drag racing is inherently an extremely selfish sport. So if you have the opportunity where you can kind of have something of the best of both worlds, because, I mean, and that's not even factoring in all the economical things of, every day that you're at the track, you've got hotels and expenses for every day your team's gone. I do think that that's the beauty of these other regional series, is that you can run your business, you can bring your family. It's more laid back. There's less red tape. And a lot of the guys that are spending this money and doing this type of racing, that they want those freedoms. They want to be able to go race. It's their hobby. And of course it's a professional level hobby, very serious business.
And to be celebrated as the top dogs on the grounds.
True.
Yeah,
good point too.
That goes a long way. There's a lot to be said for rolling into a track on a Saturday night. It's packed, even if the place only holds a couple thousand people or whatever.
You're the show.
Everyone's there to see you only. And I mean, that's at least from the roots of Pro Mod, that's the mentality of where it came from.
I agree 100%. And I wonder how much that contributes really to where the future of the NHRA series, for instance, like, because there hasn't been historically, there's always been some options, but I don't know that there's ever been the quality options that exist now. And I reached out to a slew of Midwest Drag Racing Series racers just to take temperatures, see what people were thinking, how they felt. And, I spoke to Daniel Ferris earlier today, and he's like, man, what a great time. I mean, he literally told me, like, man, I had a ton of fun. Every series is different, but there's a great vibe there. There's a great atmosphere there. And I just think it's kind of interesting how that was the first thing he mentioned. It's not, he didn't mention how great the track was until later in the conversation. He didn't mention the payout until later in the conversation. He was focused on, man, a great atmosphere, great environment. It was, really good experience overall. So I'm anxious to see.
What do you think about the effect that live streaming has had on these regional events? Like, the Midwest deal has a really nice Mav TV Plus production. Some of these other deals are on Flow Racing. Back in the day, I mean, outside of what we talk about, like Scott Caudell buying a DVD through the mail,
VHS
or whatever,
tapes.
Maybe even VHS, maybe even Laserdisc, whatever you can get, whatever you get your hands on. But that was the way you saw these, unless you were there, unless you went to these races. And so kind of this legendary word of mouth or whatever.
It's a double-edged sword, though, right? I mean, we love it. I mean, we love the hell of it, right? Because we can sit at home and watch it, but I almost think it's had a positive impact on these regional Pro Mod races. It's given more exposure and allowed them to kind of spread their product
around the country when it was just a closed off regional deal.
Well, don't you think that like the ultimate example of that is probably Donald Long's events down at,
and,
I mean,
and
yeah,
he's-
definitely
And he
started
said
with
that several times that,
Yep.
that it's grown, the
because
regular
that is
racing
like the
he does.
classic regional, historically speaking, outlaw drag racing, outlaw small tire drag racing thrived in the Southeast. I mean, all those big events, the ones that drew lots of people. I mean, even the big tire stuff, like the ADRL heydays, a lot of their biggest events took place in the Southeast, and it was really strong. But Orska, everything that George Howard did, Brainerd Optimist Dragway would have 10-5, true 10-5 shootouts. A lot of that action was on the Southeast. Whenever Donald made that, what I believe to be a fairly legendary thing, right? I mean, whenever everybody that I knew was tuning into Motormania TV to watch,
Even in the pro pits.
yeah, I mean,
You
even
know?
in the pro pits at NHRA national events, people were tuning in to see what happened. And I think it was one of the first times that the world was exposed to what was kind of happening in a pocket of the country. So I think you're right. I think like Flow Racing, all these, everybody that's streaming drag races, bangshift.com, there's been a lot of them over the years.
Right.
And they all, Warren Evans, the Division 5 TV, there's so many people that have contributed to this, but it really has helped put a lot of these events that otherwise would have happened or been talked about regionally or locally, it's put them on a worldwide stage. And there's no doubt in my mind that it's had significantly positive impact. Now, JT made a point
reach-wise, yeah.
Reach-wise, it can most assuredly, I think, impact ticket sales. I believe Jason Miller, the very well-known promoter of the Import versus Domestic World Cup Finals up at Maryland International Raceway, he's got his hand in a bunch of different things, the XDA, Drag Bike Association, but he's told me multiple times that he feels that it has helped him sell sponsorships and helped him sell tickets without question, because it piques curiosity, and it's kind of, to me, smacks of similar to how we give away the magazine online, right? I mean, you can go to dragillustrated.com right now. Great time to plug what we do. For 16 years, you can log on to dragillustrated.com right now, click that cover, and you can read the entire magazine in its entirety. And we offer that for free because we believe that it's a teaser. It's a taste. It's something to whet your appetite, because it's nothing near the experience of getting it in the mail and getting a physical copy of the magazine. You can't replace that. So I think it's the same thing. The problem will become what the NFL has faced, right? That the TV experience gets so good that it's almost better than the live game experience.
It is almost anymore, especially, they had the Red Zone channel roll out, and man, it's hard. You go to a game, you're like, you're kind of have FOMO from missing out from watching your Red Zone TV and stuff, right?
Or your stream.
You watch every touchdown.
In the stadium, you have free access to watch Red Zone on your phone, like if you're hooked to the stadium Wi-Fi.
I didn't know that.
So there's
Smart.
like people like in the game, with $1,000 seats, looking at their phone, watching Red Zone or whatever. So I mean, it's a chicken and egg type deal. We love to have those here, don't we?
We do, and it's fun because it's a fun thing to talk about. It's a fun thing to debate. I personally think, by and large, it's been massively positive. I mean, it's a good time for me to remind everybody that each and every episode of the Wes Buck Show is brought to you by our friends at Flow Racing. If you're a drag racer or a drag racing fan, you got to get on board with Flow Racing. The world leader in live sports streaming, Flow Racing provides unlimited access to drag racing's biggest events, like Donald Long's upcoming Sweet 16, No Mercy, as well as Lights Out, every stop on the PDRA and NMCA tours. Funny Car Chaos also coming up this weekend at the Texas Motorplex. World Cup Finals this fall, the Streetcar Super Nationals, and everything in between. The coolest part about it, other than being able to watch live drag racing like 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, you can watch it on any device, your desktop, computer, laptop, smartphone, or tablet, or via Apple TV, Roku, or Amazon Fire. On top of all this, and I like to throw this in there when I get the chance, Flow Racing is contributing to the growth of the sport of drag racing. This partnership that we formed with Flow Racing was really done to highlight the fact that they are doing everything they can to put money in the pocket of race promoters. And I don't know that there's anything that's more important than healthy events, healthy racing series. I don't care if it's a national touring event series or a regional event. Successful promoters make our sport, allow them the opportunity to reinvest, pay more money, charge less for tech cards and tickets. It's such a big part of it, and I truly appreciate what Flow Racing is doing to contribute to the drag racing economy. So log on to flowracing.com/drag illustrated today to join the movement. Guys, let's go ahead and bring on our first guest, or our only guest of the day. I'm really excited about this because not necessarily changing formats here today, but bringing someone along for the ride with us. We cover a lot of ground on this show each and every week. There's a lot to discuss, always a lot going on in the sport of drag racing. And I thought as we move forward into the future, getting off the hamster wheel of scrambling to get whoever won this past weekend, let's bring people on here where we can have interesting, long-form conversations, pick their brain, learn from them, and get their insight and opinion on all the various topics that we're going to cover here on the Wes Buck Show. So, ladies and gentlemen, without any further ado, top alcohol dragster superstar, the one and only Corey Mahalik. Woo!
What's up, Corey?
Total no clap from anybody, Corey. They hosed
Wes's
you
arm is bum, and he's the one clapping.
Yeah,
He loves to clap, though. He loves to clap.
I
appreciate
now
it.
pretty good.
Yeah, I can do the sprinkler.
I've been texting Wes, actually, probably went back to PRI show. I'd been watching the show, but what you guys did with the tour there and did the live show at the show, and then it seemed like you guys were on a stage every other 15 minutes to just really spread the gospel of this sport. It's really remarkable what you're doing. I think even like when Brian Loans comes on here, he reiterates that we need more people doing that, and it's really awesome. So I appreciate the opportunity, but also thanks to you guys for what you're doing.
Dude, thank you, man. It means more than you know. I mean, no surprise, I've got goosebumps, right? I mean, but it's nice when people recognize that, listen, we go on rants and ramble and we get stuff wrong and we put our foot in our mouth sometimes. But I hope that people recognize what you're saying is that we really genuinely believe that drag racing is the great American motorsport. We're so proud of this community. We're so proud of what happens within the confines of the drag racing space. And we want more people to know about it. And I said it that million times, but it's easy to be excited on Friday during qualifying under the lights or whatever. And it's easy to be excited on Saturday night during the final or Sunday at 4:00 when they're getting ready to put a Wally in somebody's hand. But it's Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. It's through the grind of the week that we need to keep this conversation going. So thank you for recognizing it. And even more so, Corey, thanks for being a part of it, man. I think let's touch a little bit. We talked about this last week, but I think as a participant, someone who is there fighting the battle, I mean, how crazy are drag racers to endure what people like you had to endure at the Gator Nationals, you know, the swamp that was we were all contending with. I mean, did you kind of feel that same sense of pride? Like, I don't know that there's that many people that would fight that battle to pursue what is, for the most part, their hobby.
Yeah, it was really interesting. I don't think that we envisioned that when we'd be leaving that track that in our trailer we'd have 12 pairs of rain boots that the entire crew had to wear in order to work on the car. But when we pulled around the bend on, I think it was Saturday evening for our only qualifying session, it was incredible. Like I know you guys were there. The amount of people that were in the grandstands that just were like salivating for the opportunity to watch some race cars go down the track. And then also the performances they got to see. I mean, they reset the factory stock showdown record on like the first pass of the weekend when there was any form of competition. So there was a massive payoff there. But as you mentioned, I mean, some of those teams were there from the regional the weekend before and just waited the entire weekend or the entire week in order to have an opportunity to finally get on the track. And when they did, I think it really paid off. But it just goes to show just how dedicated not only the people that were participating were, but also the people that were working to get that facility ready. I saw a photo, I think it was on Facebook or something, where on Saturday morning before they reset that record, I mean, there were parts of the racetrack that it looked like it never had any rubber on it ever in its entire life. And the way that they were able to get that thing ready and prepared for what was some incredible racing action is just a testament to the people that put so much time and effort to making it possible for those that do want to stay around and put on a show for fans.
I was blown away by it. I really was, because I can't imagine very many other walks of life where people would endure like that. I mean, at great expense, with considerable difficulty, hardship to be there, the stuff you're going to have to do after the fact. I was so massively impressed. I'm curious, and I'm going to steal Mike's question because I think he was going to ask this. But
thanks, man. I get one question.
Yeah,
I'm going to let you handle all the video stuff, right? We'll talk about all of Corey's involvement in video production, but one of the things that we've been blown away by and really excited about has been this youth movement that we've seen in the top alcohol ranks. What do you make of that? Like, what do you make of, what are the things that are contributing to the creation of, Megan and Rachel Meyer, who I believe have really become big personality. I mean, very well known and established racers in our community. Yourself, you're part of that conversation. Julie Natas. I mean, Will Smith. The list goes on. There's a lot of people that seem to be making waves in top alcohol dragster. What do you make of that, and how has that come to be?
Yeah, it's really interesting. As you mentioned, obviously the Meyer sisters have really headlined the alcohol dragster class for the past few years, but there is just a general youth movement where I think it's become sort of a proving grounds for those that do have those aspirations to move on to the nitro ranks. And you've seen it happen with Krista Baldwin, Justin Ashley, Matt Sackman's got his license. Jordan Vandergriff, who, if you want to, I'm sure we can talk about another big name in the news today for some other reasons, which is wild.
Yeah,
we have to talk about that.
He's, I mean, clearly the second best looking guy in drag racing, and going to be on the Bachelorette, right?
Yeah, that's
wild.
Is
it confirmed that he's going to be on there? Like what we saw is like
I couldn't figure out if it was actually confirmed or.
I think so. I saw the post that was shared, and it looked like it was from the official count. So
I must have aged out or something. There must be some kind of
Yeah, you aged out all right.
I'm getting some inside info from producer here, Dion Walraff. He's saying that he thinks that he's in like the pool.
That's what I thought.
People that they will choose from ultimately. So for those that don't know what the hell we're talking about, basically news broke here in like the last 2 hours, I think, that Jordan Vandergriff, who, as Corey has mentioned, made a run in A Fuel Dragster as well as Top Fuel Dragster, is apparently going to be on the Bachelorette. As someone who is seeking the hand of the woman who's the star of Bachelorette in 2022. I think it's a good thing. I mean, because for me, I really hope he makes it, because if he does, that's just a few times at least. Maybe he wins the whole deal, but it's a handful of times that they're going to show a highlight of a drag race on ABC. He's going to be talked about as a drag racer.
That's a big show. They'll show clips of it and everything. Absolutely. It'll be a big deal. He was on the phone.
Stud, man.
We saw him at
fans forever just for being on this show.
Yeah, it will be a dragster. Which
he was in Gainesville. We saw him hanging out in one of the pits that we were in. He was just steady on the phone, so he must have had like ABC producers on the line or something getting that deal locked up.
Yeah, I'm sure that's what it takes. Can you imagine how many people are trying to get on any of those reality shows at any given time? I cannot imagine, to be honest. But I just do find it interesting, because it doesn't seem like, to what you mentioned a minute ago, Corey, you got to make one qualifying pass in Gainesville. And I'm not trying to be negative, but I mean, it's not like there's a whole lot of allure specifically to top alcohol dragster. It's not like you guys are racing for the craziest amounts of money. It's not like you're racing. It's a class that's shown on Fox, but it still has a really strong pull. And I think you're right. It's becoming this proving ground, or a place to get your feet wet, establish yourself, get comfortable in that routine. And obviously it's a great catapult into being successful in Top Fuel or Funny Car. Do you think, is that some part of your aspirations? Just curious, because one of the observations that I always had with the Meyer sisters, and shout out to Randy Meyer, because I think he's really becoming something of a racer builder or something. Like he's taking people and molding them into very capable race car drivers. And it's a cool thing, because I know he's had his hands on some people that don't have a lot of racing experience, that didn't come up, bracket racing every weekend or driving hot rod cars, and he's still managed to turn them into formidable drag racers. Do you think that, do you have aspirations of moving up into Top Fuel? Because I always was surprised that the Meyer sisters, I almost lost my train of thought, sorry. They have seemingly no desire to move into Top Fuel. They were completely comfortable where they were, and she was able, Megan Meyer was able to secure sponsorship deals, get on the cover of Drag Illustrated magazine, really make a splash, has a strong social media following, and do it all while racing in A Fuel, because she was finding sponsorship partners that didn't really care where she races. So, I mean, how do you interpret all of that?
Yeah, it's kind of one of those things where each person has kind of their own set of priorities. So I did get my, and I still hold it, my Top Fuel license back in 2018. With that said, ever since we were able to kind of push further with our own operation, there's a different level of gratification being able to kind of pull through the gates with your own rig and have your guys there. Man, the barrier for entry in the fuel classes from the professional ranks is it's scary. The level of competition right there, it is incredible to watch from as a fan perspective. But I can only imagine what it feels like for some of those guys that are just working night in and night out, and it's just like, holy crap, what do I got to do? I got to find another 10th now when I finally found a way to run 70s, and these guys are running low or mid 60s. With that said, though, I think from the A fuel perspective, it's such a great stepping stone. I mean, outside of warming the car up on alcohol before you put it on the high side, the driving procedure is the exact same. So it's a really good way to get your feet wet. These are really fast race cars too. I don't think that they, obviously going to advocate for my own class, but I don't think they get the respect that they deserve. I remember back in the day where I got my start, actually was a alcohol funny car pit crew member back when me and Mike were living the glory days in the IHRA, and that was a professional class over there, and people marveled at the alcohol cars over there. Not as much notoriety in the NHRA side of things, but man, I really do think that they can prepare you well if that's something you're interested in. And to your point, Wes, about the Randy Meyer side of things, just done an amazing job of providing an opportunity for so many different drivers to come in and see what it's like to drive a really fast race car. But it's also opened, I think, up the opportunity where there's a lot of other teams that have followed that sort of mentality where you've got, look at the Phillips guys now. Rich has stepped out of the seat, and they've got a rotating crew of drivers that all have great opportunities to win every time they show up. The Samsols have started to rent their car out, and that thing just keeps getting faster and faster. The level of competition right now is just like at an all-time high. So yeah, it'd be awesome someday to compete at the highest level of sport, but at the same time, having a pretty good time with what's going on in the current spot that we're at as well.
With what you're doing and the way you approach racing, because you approach the sport of drag racing in a very professional manner. I mean, from the crew uniforms to the way the car looks to the way you carry yourself in person, but also on social media, it's a very tight package, right? I mean, everything looks right, fits right, feels right. Are you kind of proof positive to the point we were just trying to establish that you don't have to race Top Fuel necessarily because you're out here creating content on your own and not really relying on the NHRA's devices, right, to build your fan base? I mean, because
securing sponsors too,
and securing sponsors doing
outside the box sponsors that you've gotten to come on board.
Yeah, I hope so. I mean, that's great validation to hear from you guys. We put a lot of time and effort into those things. Like over the off season, we created like some proprietary social media templates to do video updates at every single race that we rolled out in Gainesville, and they were really well received. The validation awesome for us has been to what you mentioned, Mike, was bringing in some non-endemic partners with Fund That Flip and the Empowerment Alliance, both that have had tremendous responses from the overall fan base, as well as their employees and teams from their experiences coming to the track. It's difficult to sell at times from not having the same level of exposure and TV coverage that we get. But we've been able to find some specific ways, doing some non-traditional approaches, and we're hopeful that that can continue to grow. And if one day it did lead us into another avenue at a higher level, so be it. But otherwise, it's been really gratifying to see that it can be successful at the alcohol level.
Do you mentioned those video templates that you rolled out? We all noticed that, and especially us here. And we've always said that, or at least when we started seeing your car and we did a feature on you in the magazine, started to get to know you more and see the stuff you're doing, then obviously all of your video production, the aesthetic, the approach that you have to the sport of presenting not only your team, but just the sport in general in a different way, in a more professional way, in a more artistic type of way. We try to do that here. I don't think maybe we're not achieving the same level that you have, but that's been our sort of mantra when we started the magazine, that we're not going to make it look like every other car magazine. It's going to look different. We're going to present this sport in a more dramatic, personable
cinematic
cinematic way. And that's sort of been the baseline of what we've tried to do here. It seems like you're trying to do that with video. And for anyone that's not familiar with Corey's videos, he's actually covered the PDRA. He did an amazing year-end wrap-up video for the PDRA. He's done
it was
a ton
awesome.
of stuff. Yeah,
it was awesome.
He covered, you've done several for Norwalk, right? For the Night of Fire deal and for their national event. Just sort of run us through what is your background? What drew you to that? What is your motivation behind putting all that time and effort and resources into those videos? And just kind of where did that mentality come from?
Yeah, that's actually how I got involved with the sport. So I'll be the first one to admit, especially when it comes to our racing operation, I'm one of the lesser mechanically inclined team members. They found ways for me to work on certain things to hopefully not screw them up too bad. But I got involved by just going to the racetrack and actually documenting things and just kind of playing around as a growing up in a 3-sport athlete. I was obviously loved the NFL film stuff and all those types of things to get super motivated. And I didn't see that same level of production value, at least in the areas of the sport that I was involved in, being kind of incorporated. And we took a year off in 2018 due to some personal matters. And that was my opportunity to get out to the racetrack. It was actually for that Norwalk event that you mentioned. Bill Bader invited me to come up and said, "Hey, I want people to see the sport, and I want to see the patriotism that we put on at this racetrack." The reason that video took off was, I think, because he had his classic, "If you don't love this country, get the hell out of here," or whatever line that he always says. And people really like that. But from there, some really cool opportunities have come from that. To this day, I mean, obviously, I'm heavily involved in the sport in terms of our team, but I still feel like I'm as big of a fan as I am like an actual participant. I daydream about this stuff. Like, I listen to music and I think about going out and making a pass and getting the opportunity to run under the lights and stuff like that. And those types of things I'm able to, when I go out and I actually video stuff, I try to translate that. It's like, these people, even though I race beside them, most of them are still my heroes. It's like, I want to be able to, like, I see Jackie out there and she's running like a 5:12 and I'm like, man, I want to do that so bad. But I just like, it seems bigger than life a lot of times. And it's like, how can I pair a visual with some really epic music and just show just truly how awe-inspiring this sport is? Man, when you slow it down, sometimes it's just unbelievable what these race cars can do. It doesn't matter what it is. The PWRA stuff's been such a breath of fresh air too. Tyler Krosno's created some incredible opportunities to show it in different angles that I don't think a lot of people have ever seen before. And I'm really appreciative of that. And we're going to do some more of that this year, as well as it looks like maybe a couple opportunities with some of the NHRA. So I love doing it just because I think that it's an opportunity to just really show people that this stuff is just like larger than life, and the people that do it are even bigger than that.
Great answer.
Yeah.
My goodness.
And your background, though, before you have a clearly education and your day job. I mean, what's your background outside of the sport from a video production or artistic standpoint that you bring to the sport?
Yeah, so I'm my day job is I work as a creative director at an advertising agency. I oversee a handful of different design and video production teams. But this is my opportunity to actually still get my hands dirty and do things, to be able to really pair it up. I mean, a passion from drag racing with a technical skill set that I put a lot of time and effort into trying to perfect. It's kind of like the perfect 1-2 punch. What I'd love to at some point in the future, maybe do that full time. But right now with the family and what's going on from a racing perspective, it's what makes the most sense. But it's also, I think, something that allows me to keep learning from a professional standpoint as well on a day-to-day basis.
Do you think that, how excited are you when you see someone like, this is something we've talked about a lot, what Tony Stewart's involvement in the sport of drag racing is going to have? Because I think everybody immediately thinks about, what's going to happen on the racetrack, and are they going to be competitive? Are they going to contend for a championship? But we've talked a lot here on the show that what we're most excited about is kind of all the off-track stuff that he's likely going to bring to the table. The first time we were really exposed to it was when he announced the formation of his team late last year. It's this huge production, cameras everywhere, lights. I mean, it's full-blown Hollywood. Do you, knowing what you know about video production and being as passionate about storytelling and content creation as you are, does that excite you to see maybe some of that Fox Sports, NASCAR, Hollywood infiltrate drag racing?
Oh, absolutely. I think that it's going to really push the needle in terms of that aspect of the sport. I think back to even before they announced the team, when he was getting his license at Hawley's school, and they did all those teaser videos. That was one of those moments where you're like, yo, this could be big. I mean, the production value that they put into that stuff, so refreshing to see somebody that's not traditional from the drag racing side make a video and not have super comp audio with the Top Fuel car and things like that. Like they knew what they were doing and they were taking it seriously. And I think that they're only going to continue to push it further from there. And it's going to, I think, make all the other teams just invest that much more as well. And it's going to benefit a lot of people.
What would you say to somebody? Because we talked about all the videos you've done at React 104. We talk about Tony Stewart Racing, but not everybody's got that level of equipment, that level of experience. What do you have people come to you for advice and say like, hey, how can I kind of do what you're doing? Or do you get a lot of inquiries like that? And how do you answer those questions? Like,
I was going to ask if Fox and NHRA and the big wigs come and pick your brain about some of this stuff now that your name and your work's getting out there more.
They should.
Well, I mean, if they're not, they should. But I mean, I think that there's a lot of racers it's a tough deal being willing to get in front of the camera, right? I mean, it's not for everybody. And I do think it's a skill that develops just like anything, reps and sets, right? I mean, you just got to do it a lot. But do you have any advice or like actionable things that people could put into play? Because I think there's a lot of racers that would benefit, their sponsors would benefit, their team would benefit just from the ego trip that they're going to get from seeing themselves in a video. I mean, is there anything that you can offer people out there that maybe don't have a pro level video rig or don't have someone to do it? Yeah.
And going back to my earlier point where I was saying I've consumed a lot of DI content over the past few months, going back to PRI, when you guys were on the stage, I think it was the influencer stage. I believe that was what it was called. And Mike, you had mentioned something about the PDRA video the night before. And you had a great quote where you said, there's a place for that stuff in the sport, but it's not what it needs to be everywhere. I mean, those videos take me 6-8 weeks to create. Obviously that's not productive in terms of being able to get people out in front of the camera and getting their name out there. But just taking that opportunity to really just put yourself out there. You don't need a professional rig. I mean, it's insane. The cell phone that's in your pocket has a higher megapixel camera than something you could buy for $20,000 10 years ago. You can create some really great stuff where as long as you're getting your face out there, providing any types of updates, whether it's in the shop, at the racetrack itself, to be able to get that type of face time, be able to take that back, especially if you are in the hunt to hopefully land a partner or two. Those are the types of things to be able to have in your back pocket, because for as much as you see people on there right now, it's just a very small percentage of the community that is kind of taking up what that whole space has to offer. And it's not only going to help yourself, but it's going to help the sport as a whole. And that's really what it's most important for everybody.
I think so too. I mean, and it's so hard, but turning that camera around and pointing it at yourself, you don't, in this day and age, we're so lucky in so many ways. Like for everything that can be said negative about social media and whatnot, this world we live in, and there are, obviously there's highs and lows to this whole thing, but you don't need to wait on Fox Sports. Like
everybody has their own soapbox.
Man.
Right.
I mean, and some people don't need them, right? Yeah, but I mean, at the same time, it's a very, very, very important thing.
Well,
in my opinion.
even like Corey, we know his work before we know him. And I think these videos that we saw in Gainesville may be the first time that I saw you speaking on camera. That's what struck me about it, is that we're seeing him sort of turn the camera around on himself and actually include him and his team when he's sort of put everyone else in the spotlight up until now. So even if it's not you putting yourself in the spotlight to begin with, start by just showing your car, show, your shop, show whatever it is, even if you don't want to put yourself on it, but you've got to start somewhere. And I think to your point, Corey, is that so many people think they've got to get like to your level of video production before their first video drops, but that's just not true. There is a place for that, like we said, but you've got to start somewhere and just get it out there, get started, get comfortable with it. And before you know it, your work's going to get better. Your production value is going to get better. Your reach is going to increase. More people are going to be watching. And then it's time to turn the camera on yourself and sort of take off. And I think
that evolution's part of the story. I mean, we run into that quite frequently with, customers at Drag Illustrated Magazine, where we'll have someone that's like, hey, I want to advertise in the magazine, or I want you to do this, but I think let's wait until I've won like a championship, or we win a couple of races or set some records. And it's like, no. Like, you're probably most interesting right now as you're building something. More people can relate to that struggle, that hero's journey, as they talk about all the time in storytelling and movie scripts and everything else. Without that early struggle, the rest of the movie struggles to make sense. Like if you just introduce people to you or your brand or your race team or whatever it is when you're at the top of the mountain, yeah, that's going to be a tough thing to draw the connection.
Those updates you were doing, I think you started on like Wednesday, and you gave us like a testing update, and like Thursday was like, it's raining here. We didn't really do anything today, but you still did a video. And I think that really proves our point that even though you literally didn't even get the car on track that day, you still did a video. And I think so many people are waiting for that perfect opportunity, perfect production, perfect
inspiration.
Win.
How many times have we talked to a writer?
Information as well.
Yeah, man. But there's been
a service
10,000 instances where we've had a writer that's like, man, I'm just struggling inspiration wise. And that's when what I think you really demonstrated in Gainesville was just discipline. Like, hey, I'm going to post a video. Can you tell us, like, was that a challenge for you? Because I think it will help people to hear that it might have been, like, to hold yourself to those, hey, I'm going to post an update every day, no matter what, whether we're racing, whether we're win, lose, or draw.
Yeah, it was. And to Mike's point too, to that point, I think most of our updates were either photos with longer captions where we've included some quotes, or it would be like some more highly produced, like onboard videos that showed like a run. That was a specific thing that we kind of challenged ourselves with at the beginning of the year. Was we're going to make this sort of setup so that we know that it's sustainable when we're at the racetrack. We've already got basically everything set up other than throw in a video of the recap of the day and then kind of go from there. And yeah, it was definitely not the ideal race to do that on, because just how many delays that happened. We made one test run on Wednesday. We were hoping we have like results from 4 of them. And then we didn't get on track again until Saturday evening. But at the same time, we needed to make sure that we were starting this cadence. This is something we're hoping to do for the entire year, that you guys can expect this, so that every day at the end of the day, what happened? Let me see some things that were going on with the team. Let me see what happened inside the race car, and then get me pumped for the next day then.
We used to actually, we'd record once, right, Wes? And we never watch it back, and we'd make ourselves post it before we watched it, or else it would have never got posted.
I mean,
that is the secret.
You hate the sound of your voice. You hate how you looked there. You stumbled on that word, but you know, it is what it is. And
you're
human. Everything doesn't have to be so refined this day and age, right? I mean, you can stumble, you can talk about something, you can throw the wrong information in there on accident. And really,
misspell,
but
or misspeak on someone's
it's not
name
going on
or whatever.
ABC's, nationwide news. It's going on Facebook. So if you do mess something up, oh, my bad, in the comments or whatever. But if you rewatch it and you nitpick yourself, you probably won't post it. I mean, you just won't.
Yeah.
I agree, and I honestly
think secret to this show. We don't watch the show. We the three of us.
I
refuse.
Can't stand how I look.
I've never watched a second of this show.
Yeah,
because I may not ever be on here again after that. After that happens. So
it's true, man. I mean, I know that was one of the biggest hurdles for me. Was I couldn't watch it back. I couldn't do that because I would rip it apart. I'd want to redo it. I'd want to reshoot it in better light.
We make Dion watch it. Dion is
somebody's got to watch it.
Dion's our content creator guy. He's actually in the green room right now, taking notes and ready to cut this thing down. So we make him watch it and listen to all of our annoying talking.
Well, hey, I want to remind everybody real quick before I've got another couple of subjects that I want to touch on with Corey, but I do want to remind all of you guys watching out there, each and every episode of the Wes Buck Show is brought to you by our friends at Stroud Safety. What can you say about these guys? Tommy Cunningham and the gang at Stroud Safety are amongst the biggest supporters of Drag Illustrated and the Wes Buck Show. If you want the best racing safety equipment, from fire suits to seatbelts and chutes to ballistic blankets, and you want to buy made in America products, call Stroud Safety today or check them out online at stroudsafety.com. We had big news earlier in the week, guys, that Julia Natas will be debuting a fuel funny car at this coming weekend's Funny Car Chaos Classic, a massive production by Chris and Tara Graves in conjunction with Andy Carter and the gang at the Texas Motorplex. Big deal. I mean, this is a significant happening. If you factor in any of the success that Randy Meyer has had in every other venture, there's no doubt in my mind that this is going to be a successful endeavor for that team. Corey, What do you make of what's happening with Funny Car Chaos right now? There seems to be a renewed interest in this type of racing. Eighth Mile, there's a lot of factors. There's really loose rules. I mean, I think we're going to see 3 A-Fuel funny cars this weekend, a multitude of nitro cars, alcohol cars, screw blowers, roots. I think there maybe is a twin turbo car that's going to show up. What do you think of this whole scene? Does that entice you at all? Do you think that there's opportunity in that space, or how do you interpret it?
Yeah, I think that every A-Fuel car in the country is going to be watching to see what they do this weekend. There's a lot of interest already in terms of people potentially wanting to make the shift to be able to do that. Even just down in Gainesville, how many people before Julie announced that were talking about what are they going to give us the opportunity? I know that there was a little bit of talk to potentially do it this year, but now it's sounding like maybe it's next year. And even the NHRA posted it on their website. Saying that they're going to continue to monitor how this specific thing goes. It's exciting for sure. At the same time, I know that there's a lot of purists that really like that alcohol funny car was blown alcohol funny cars. And the only concern, I think, from the dragster side of things is, do we potentially cannibalize some of a pretty healthy class in order to raise the car count in an otherwise somewhat unhealthy class? The hope would be that this excites some people to bring out a new car that maybe weren't racing in the dragsters, and here and there. I'm sure that we'll lose a couple if it ends up happening, but at the same time, it is going to be pretty cool to see how they do. And like you mentioned, it seems like anything that Randy Meyer does, it starts to haul ass pretty quick. So we'll see what they're able to do down there.
And for those that don't know, what Corey's talking about, this change potentially is the introduction or reintroduction, I guess maybe, of the A-Fuel combination, the injected nitro combination, which has been prohibited from funny car, top alcohol funny car for quite some time. Perhaps bringing that back into the fold and bringing injected nitro, which is I would say right now, the combination of choice in top alcohol dragster, allowing that to enter into the fray with top alcohol funny car. But I do think that's an interesting point that everybody has to always be aware of, is that you introduce this new thing. I've been very concerned about that when it comes to this new factory experimental class that the NHRA has been very excited about, very vocal about, a lot of excitement about it. But I go, man, pro stock is so healthy right now, looking good. You got to be really careful, because you don't want 2 or 3 or 4 of those guys defecting and going over to that category, because it may help that one momentarily or bolster it early on, but you've hurt one of your core categories. So you make a really good point. I wonder, like Midwest Drag Racing Series 2 years ago announced the inclusion of top alcohol funny car in the 8th mile. I think there were 6 or 8 cars at the event this past weekend in Texas. And now you've got 60 plus funny cars showing up for Funny Car Chaos. And that event is not, there's a series, the Funny Car Chaos series. I mean, they race multiple events across the country. Are you at all interested in that space though? Like beyond the confines of NHRA, is it exciting for you to have other places to race potentially, or other places for your top alcohol brethren to go race, like on the 8th mile, being the star of the show? Because that's one of the things that I think is enticing, is that when you go to a Funny Car Chaos event, if you've got an A-Fuel funny car, you're going to be one of the stars of the show. You're the central focus of this whole event. God knows it's good for egos. It's good for all sorts of things, right?
Yeah, and I know a lot of the guys that do those series, man, they have a great time with them. As you guys say a lot of times on the show, the NHRA is still, for all intents and purposes, the big ticket item in terms of going out and racing in. But when it comes to alcohol funny car, you can't think of NHRA alcohol funny car right now without thinking about Sean Bellemere. And he's one of the biggest advocates for the Midwest Drag Racing Series. Him and his team just absolutely love going over there and running. And it's to the points that you mentioned. They are one of the premier classes. The fans love them. They hype the class up. They give them priority in terms of some of the times that they get to run. And that gets a lot of people excited at the NHRA races, thinking about the opportunity to be able to do so. I don't think it would ever be a mass exodus by any means. If there was ever an opportunity from a dragster side of things, it would be kind of interesting from a rules perspective, the way that went, just given that they run 8th mile, especially with the A-Fuel cars making kind of a harder charge in the top end in order to kind of close the gap on what some of the blown guys are doing. But it'd always be something I think that people would be definitely willing to entertain.
What is the draw to A-Fuel? Billy Carroll asked a great question in here. Is it more efficient, easier on parts, more mild at the hit? I mean, we've seen, again, the top alcohol pretty much. Are we going to change the name of top alcohol dragster to injected nitro dragster? I mean, we still call it that, right? But it's really gone that direction. So what has fueled that movement, and why is it preferred?
Yeah, I think there's a couple things in there. One is what we mentioned earlier. It is a good stepping stone if you did ever want to go into the fuel ranks. The other, from a parts standpoint, you can find a way to be pretty hard on them if you want to, but at the same time, they do not turn the RPMs that a blown car does. So if you can really dial it in, you can be still pretty aggressive, but also have less parts attrition that kind of goes in there as far as some of the consumables are concerned. But it's also just shown to be a pretty attainable combination if you can kind of get a baseline going and then chip away from it there. So
what do those things turn going through the traps? Like what kind of RPM does
the most RPM they see is actually during the burnout? It's like 6,500.
I was going to say there's something that got turning like $4,000 at the finish line. I mean, they're doing that. So you're saying it's less exotic of a combination, would you say, as far as like needing to have this whole exotic blown program that will turn the high RPM?
Yeah, and from some of the stuff. Yeah, some of the stuff that I've talked to in terms of a few of our friends in the class that run on the blown side of things, it all comes down to the blower too. I mean, if you don't have a great blower, I mean, like top of the line blower, you cannot push to run the high teens or the low 20s that it takes to be competitive these days. And man, if you backfire those a couple times and the expense that comes with one of those that you don't need to worry about with an A fuel car, that can get pretty daunting pretty quickly.
It's good information.
It's really interesting, man, because to be honest with you, and I am the first to admit that while certainly a big fan of all things nitro, I don't have a lot of experience with it. And the experience I do have with it is just sheer terror. Like, I don't want to be anywhere near anything that's burning nitromethane, right? And I find it interesting.
He's even told me that. Stay away from that.
I do. I mean, if JT is at the track with me, or if any of my, anybody that I care about is around me, I'm like, hey, stay away from those.
The ones I'm scared of
they
are
combust
the Harleys, the Top Fuel Harleys. Ever since we published a photo of this guy basically looking like he's getting, shot with a rocket when his Top Fuel Harley hydraulic or something behind the water box, I was like, yeah, I'm going to pass on that. That's kind of how it was with the old ADRO Pro Extreme days. Like, if your car has a Rebel flag on it and it's got a screw blower and it's from Texas or whatever,
10% nitro or something, yeah,
I'm hiding when you're firing that bad boy up.
Yeah, run away. But I guess my thought is, it just kind of shocks me that it is so commonplace, right? I mean, it's just, there's a dozen nitro burning dragsters here in the sportsman pits. And it's just impressive to me that there's not the issues. I mean, do you think that there's a little bit of a bad rap? Does nitro get maybe more of a bad rap than it deserves, Corey?
Well, back in the day, I mean, there was some stuff too where they really needed to learn, especially from like a post-run servicing routine, the specific steps that you needed to take in order to make it safe. So getting the nitro actually out of the motor, so windmilling it and making sure that the proper stuff was done so that it was safe, because there were some people that got hurt, just not fully understanding. But now that there are so many people, the practices that have been put in place, I think it is, it's much more attainable. And it's funny you say that, Wes. I kind of had my welcome to nitro racing moment on my first licensing lap. Actually, it was over in Indianapolis, and I was first up backing up from the burnout. The first time you're ever backing up from a burnout and you smell nitro and you know it's coming from your car, that's kind of like a holy shit moment. But
something I never thought about.
Yeah, it's like, holy crap, this is about to happen, isn't it? But anyways, we instantly smoked the tires. And when we're towing the car back to the pits, one of the front A-arms broke. So if that car went down the racetrack, the front wheel was coming off in the first run I've ever made in a fuel car. So that was like one of those oh man, that could really bad, but then just kept on going.
Yeah, that would have, that's
meant to be, man. At that point, you got to keep going.
You got to keep going, man. But that's so true. And I can't honestly imagine. Like, I was thinking about it the other day, because you were saying all these opportunities that exist to drive these cars. There's a lot of seats available. I mean, you don't have to ring a whole lot of phones to be driving an A fuel car Friday. Like, you can make a couple of calls and that's happening. But then you start to wrap your head around how fast these cars are. 5 teens, almost 300 mile an hour. I mean, I'm not sure. Right. And I think that that's kudos to you and the multitude of people, especially when you start talking about these young women. It's another place where I think our sport really flexes its muscles, because I don't know that there's any other really walk of life where you're going to see that kind of man versus machine or woman versus machine and see those people competing on a level playing field, so to speak. I don't know how much you're familiar with this, but I want to throw this out there and kind of just talk a little bit about it. We're wrapping up hour 1 of the show. I want to thank everybody for tuning in. Whether you're watching along on YouTube, if you're watching on Facebook, please click that like button, click the share button, follow, give us a subscribe on YouTube. Make sure you get notified for any of the new content we've got. Big race coming up this weekend, guys. Donald Long Sweet 16 version 5.0. An event that burst onto the scene with $100,000+ payday, bringing out all the heaviest hitters in radio versus the world. Just talking about formats of events. What do you guys make of the limited spectator participation? It's got like a Fight Club vibe. It's super underground, the hardest of hardcores, multiple runs, I think, 8-10 rounds of qualifying. Just, Mike, I'll throw it to you first. I understand that everybody's kind of got different strokes for different folks, but I do like the limited engagement type of thing, right? I mean, I understand the business perspective of saying, oh man, kick the gates open and sell tickets to as many people as humanly possible. But I say this all the time, everybody wants what no one else has, right? And when there's only 500 tickets available, it just it generates this interest and this enthusiasm that is hard to deny.
Well, Donald, this may be the only one that's like that, right? I mean, is there another event that's a limited engagement, limited ticket deal in drag racing? I'm not familiar with one.
There is,
and I think
some underground stuff for street.
Maybe but I don't know. I think it's hard to sustain. I think it's like everything else we talk about with the heads up stuff, and especially the radial stuff. It's tough to sustain. I think, like you said, the 101,000, that was a few years ago when he paid that. It's not that now. And we've seen the shift from, I think that event was built around radio versus the world. And we've seen these other classes that are now competed there or contested there, obviously, that have sort of stolen the show from RVW. And I think that that's continuing. And it's just because it's hard to sustain the level of performance that event is built around. And I think that as that continues to change, that an event like this is going to be tough.
We've been to them, and it was just, I just don't think it has the buzz when you're there. Even if you are there and you are in the limited crowd of, let's just say like Lights Out 7 or whatever, where it's packed and pandemonium and the stands are packed and the starting line is just packed full of people, and everybody's paying attention. It just has kind of a, I don't know, kind of like a race that doesn't have any spectators.
Coming out of Gainesville, the number one thing I saw on social media, I think, Corey, you may have even mentioned this. I saw several posts about this. I think Dylan Voss made a post about it. This is why we do this. And why people choose to race in HRA in so many situations where it's really a kick in the ass compared to what they could do as far as racing a different series in front of a smaller spectator crowd, is that the energy, the buzz, the experience of racing in front of such a big crowd. I can remember back in the day, we used to run these regional series. We ran IHRA. They had decent crowds, but like a drag stock 2, when people were literally like falling out of the grandstands. And anytime there was a packed crowd, I can remember my dad telling me, was it drag stock 3?
Yeah.
Okay, my bad. Yeah,
that's all good.
This is why I do this, or this really. And I always remember he'd go out and he'd do like a 8th mile burnout, and I knew he was pumped up because the longer the burnout, the higher RPM.
He's putting on a show.
He's jacked up really for no other reason than the crowd is on their feet. So there's a lot to be said for that when it comes to this sport. In my opinion, and it's something we don't focus on enough.
We heard that at the Door Slammer Nats, some of these pro stock drivers, remember saying, coming through that crowd of people on the
they waited their whole life for that moment to be the center of attention.
Yeah. And I mean, it was almost like a grudge race, when they were coming through everybody in their burnout, and they said, "Oh my God," it kind of made me nervous at first, but yeah, it was so awesome, rolling down through there.
Yeah.
So
I don't know, man. Like I remember the first time I was exposed really to an event like this was when JT and I drove down, made the trek to the greater Dallas area, actually, Cato Mills, Texas, to the Texas Invitational, which was at the time the Super Bowl of street legal, like high-end street car racing, right? It was done at an old airport. It was on a concrete airport runway, and every heavy-hitting street race guy with a big power LS car, Corvettes, Vipers, Camaros, Mustangs, Lamborghinis, Audi R8s, all these exotics and a plethora of late model American performance cars would come down here, but it was super, super exclusive. I mean, you had to enter well in advance. You could only have X amount of crew guys. It was you literally felt like you were at some sort of underground street race. Like it felt like we shouldn't be here. Like, are we getting in trouble? Are the cops coming? And I think
we probably shouldn't have been.
We probably shouldn't have been there. But when I look at whenever I went to Sweet 16, the first version, and I still think it has that. I mean, or at least it has the potential to have that underground fight club type of thing. Like nobody talks about what happens here. I almost think that's one of those events where it would be better off where it wasn't live streamed. Like it's one of the rare occasions where I think you almost need to make it something that you have to be there. You can't watch it. The only people who get to experience this paid the ticket or made the trek to Valdosta, Georgia, because I don't know. I can't personally, my promoter brain, like the Barnum and Bailey in me, I can't help but when I get around this group of people and I see the egos come out and I see the characters come out, and I think, man, there's probably an opportunity. Corey, if I got you, I mean, you've got one of the fastest top alcohol cars on the planet Earth, right? If I said, hey, let's get a bunch of guys, let's get 8 guys to throw $5,000 in the hat, and we're all each, and we're going to go race for it, this weekend at the Texas Motorplex, and we're not going to let anybody in. I think that's exciting real quick. I really do. I mean, I think it gets exciting really quick.
But does it change it though if you let people in to watch it, Corey?
I think it just kind of comes down to how are we teasing it out? Like, what is the sort of way that we're drumming up the interest so that people are still following what's going on? At the end of the day, yeah, we want to race. So we're going to be there just because it sounds like a great time. But at the same time, what are we doing as well to be able to really grow the sport and get people that want to be interested when they can come see it?
Yeah, that's what I was going to say, is that an event like Sweet 16, or even as Corey started in his point there, the racers still love an event like this. And we're seeing like Alex Taylor, she just announced today she's driving the Bumblebee Camaro in RVW this weekend. This is something that racers really want to be a part of. But it's more of a racer-centric event, not as much of a fan-centric event. Let me put it that way. I think that
so much of our sport leans that way, though, right?
Right, exactly. But if you look at it through that lens, it's probably successful. If you look at it through a fan or promotion or any of the other lenses, that it's probably not as.
It's just funny. It's just funny because
successful as
you hear all these racers complain they want to race in front of crowds all the time. We hear it all the time.
I also hear guys tell me that they want to make 70 runs. I mean, I go to some of these events and I can't help but feel like people are having more fun during the pre-race test because they got to hot lap their shit 4 or 5 times, and it's like, at the end of the day, you've got all this money wrapped up in this thing and you want to do some burnouts. Like, I want to make some noise. I want to make some smoke, I want all that smoke. That's what they want. They want to go out and race. So I can kind of see it both ways. And I think the lesson maybe is that you can't be everything to everybody. And I think Donald, what I see from him in this is he's got 2 marquee events. Lights Out this year in its 13th year, still packed out. I talked to Mark Woody Woodruff, a legend of the radial ranks, a legend of small tire drag racing. He told me, man, I've been to every one of them, I think. And this was without question the most human beings I've ever seen there. Like he said, there was so many people there. Saturday, the crowd was bananas. And it's really impressive because there's not a whole lot of events that have stood the test of time quite like that. So he's got the big barn burner, everybody come out, climbing over the fence to get in the place event in February. And he has a very similar event in October, November, right, with No Mercy. And I think if you really think about what it takes to put on these events, how stressful it is, how strenuous it is. He probably doesn't have the appetite or the desire to do another one of those events where people are having heat strokes and people are crashing into each other in the parking lot because there's cars everywhere.
Yeah.
It's a huge nightmare. So I think that for him, there's some selfish motivations for this event. And he's told me before that it's like the most fun he has putting on races is this one, because he can have the big race and have all that, but without all the headache and hard work and heartache that comes with dealing with the public, right? Anybody that's been in business for themselves or worked in a forward-facing business knows that it's tough dealing with the public.
We talked about it earlier this week, I think, or last week or whatever it was, that that was one of the funner races we went to, but we were almost as a spectator, right? We were down at someone's camper, and we were up on top of it. We were having drinks and
names will not be named.
Yeah, I had a great time, and but we did. It was one of the funner races we'd been to in years, I'd say, right?
Oh, I mean, are you talking about when we went to Sweet 16, the first one? Absolutely. Yeah. I think that I'm just saying that it reminds me of like Bloodsport, right? Like Jean-Claude Van Damme, and they're on that weird V thing. Why the hell would you fight on that? Right? And
why wouldn't you, man?
Yeah, true. But like, there's like 80 people there and everybody's like well-dressed and rich or whatever and betting on it. It just felt, that's what I see. And maybe that's not what everybody else sees. But when I look at Sweet 16, I go, man, I actually really like this. I think the only way it could be better is if there was no testing. I know that everybody loves to run the wheels off their stuff, so that would be a tough sell. But just imagine the intensity. That's one of my favorite things about no prep racing. We're drawing names out of a hat and we're drag racing. Like someone's winning and losing right now. We're not going to practice for 3 hours. We're not going to practice for 3 days. We're going to have a drag race right now. And what do you make of that? When you look at the excitement and all the everything good that has come from the Street Outlaws scene, Corey, the No Prep Kings, how do you view that brand of drag racing and what they've done to the sport or done for the sport?
I think it's just opened up a lot of opportunities for people, and it's really cool to see people going both directions. So you've got a lot of the those fans that do check out what's going on in some of the bigger series, but then you've got bigger names within our side of the pond, if you will, with like Paige Coughlin getting interested in finding ways to make her way over there. So it's cool to start seeing that crossover and having people to root for. And I mean, obviously Coughlin's one of the biggest names in the sport, no matter what series you're a part of. So I think the more that happens, I mean, it's just continuing just to the recurring theme of any of your shows. And then what I've said a couple times so far is it's all for the betterment of the sport. There's so many different types of drag racing, but it's drag racing. And what do we got to do to continue to push it forward?
I couldn't agree more. Very well said, because we need all those things, in my opinion. Like we need the marquee attractions. We need that reality TV push. We need all these things thriving, and it's tough. Let's brace. If there's ever a day when all of this stuff is healthy simultaneously, it would be something special. And that's another thing, and it's a complete departure from what we were just talking about. But whenever you think about why aren't we seeing more cars show up at those Midway's drag racing series, when you think about the opportunity that Sean Bellemere has touted here on our show, many of the Jim and Annie Whiteleys, Annie Strasberg, everybody that's involved with that series says nothing but positive things, but we haven't seen the 20, 30 cars maybe that I kind of thought we'd see 20. I really did. I thought we'd see over, a full field of top alcohol funny cars showing up at those events. Does that just speak to the allure of the Wally and the NHRA still being like you mentioned earlier, the ultimate proving ground for all things drag racing? Because I'm surprised we haven't seen more people dive into those opportunities. The Pro Mod series, the NHRA Pro Mod series, has been massively impacted by the wealth of opportunities that exist at these other regional series, but it doesn't seem like it's really penetrated the top alcohol rinks the same way.
You only stay in a relationship for so long and treated bad before you finally get a divorce and find something better, right? I mean, you can kind of.
But I'm surprised more people haven't dived into it. I really am.
Yeah.
Corey, what do you make of that?
It's a good question. And I mean, it kind of makes me wonder as well, is the health of that type of racing potentially that far deteriorated that maybe the car counts are not only just low from an NHRA standpoint, but is it across the board? To be able to get people to go out there and do that? Because like you mentioned, it's generally positive across the board. It is a little bit different
100%,
because
yeah.
you're going to run 8th mile instead of quarter mile, which is traditionally what they have only ever run. But you've seen how well Pro Mod has adapted to that format in so many different series and how much they've embraced it as well. So it's not like it's going to be something that kills the class. But yeah, I mean, it's a very fair question. I believe I don't know the actual number, but I believe the entry fee is a little bit higher, but also you can win a lot more if you are successful there. So it just kind of comes down to how much you want to bet on yourself. But the guys that do run it, they seem to consistently run it as well. It's not kind of like a one and done.
I agree. And it's how much of a deciding factor for you as a racer is the 8th? And this is going to be an interesting one because you don't have the decades of kind of predetermined belief systems or whatever of a multi-generational racer, right?
Mm-hmm.
You admitted earlier that you're relatively new to the sport, do you have a strong opinion on the 8th versus quarter mile? And what's your take on that debate? Because I've literally had a conversation this morning with a gentleman who believes without a shadow of a doubt that all of drag racing should be 8th mile. And that's something that we're missing. Safer, easier on parts, less damage, less oil downs, less explosions, less catastrophes. Where do you stand on 8th versus quarter mile?
Yeah, I think taking my particular car out of the equation,
Right.
just given the differences of what it takes to run one of those, that's actually something that I've really started to embrace a little bit more now that I've branched out through the React 104 stuff and worked with PDRA and not only focused on the NHRA side of things. I've seen the value in the way that the other series out there can really take advantage of some differentiation. Drag racing is traditionally associated with the quarter mile, but it doesn't need to be that across the board. And seeing how successful it can be, and man, how fast those pro mods can be, and how fast some of those other cars in those other series are at that 8th mile speed or 8th mile distance, where I don't know if I want to see the way they're set up if they go any further than that, just because of how out of control they can be. So I don't think that, me personally, I'm particularly attached. I think that is one of the nice things, that there is the differentiation between the series, depending on what you want to do. Whether that single distance needs to be established, I don't think that's necessary.
Mike, what do you think? I mean, I don't think the show is any lesser. I mean, we've beat the quarter mile drum, and I'm certainly a big believer in it. And I can make what I believe to be a solid case for all drag racing being quarter mile. But I certainly understand the advantages. I understand the reasoning behind shortening the racing distance. Mike, do you think there's any less entertainment value? I mean, we're talking about some of the hottest properties in drag racing, the aforementioned Street Outlaws, No Prep Kings, Donald Long's events, the PDRA. I mean, there's a massive move towards 8th mile drag racing, and people don't seem to be complaining about it.
I think it's probably specific to pro mod style racing, because that started in the Southeast. 8th mile is the standard in the Southeast. In fact, until IHRA pro mod and NHRA pro mod, that was really the only series that ran quarter mile nationally. And I know on the West Coast and in the Midwest and everything, it's different. But I think that that's a sort of a legacy deal in pro mod that has expanded. I think ADRL took that to the national stage, the presentation of 8th mile racing, and then it's just continued on from there. The evolution has continued with PDRA, Midwest Pro Mod, or Drag Racing Series, even, like we said, No Prep Kings. So I think that it's accepted in these door car classes, but not so much maybe in funny car or top alcohol dragster, or really obviously anything else. I think it's just the way it's presented. I think the key thing, like we've said, is that the theater that it's presented in. If you go watch 8th mile pro mods, and in fact, if you Farmington Dragway was in the news this week with a tragic accident that happened there this weekend. And that's an old school 8th mile track that up until just probably a handful of years ago, they were running 3-second 8th mile pro mods there. And if you go watch 2 pro mods nearly touch doors going down through there, running 3 seconds at 200 miles an hour, that'll give you a new respect for 8th mile drag racing. But if you go see that same presentation at ZMAX Dragway, it just doesn't hold the same weight. And I think that really is what it's all about.
Bro, if you go watch a Midwest Drag Racing Series event and you watch Top Alcohol Funny Car, you think you're watching, like the venues they go to make all the difference. Like if you watch two alcohol funny cars do burnouts, back up, rev the motors up, people, I mean, on at XRP at Extreme Raceway Park in Ferris, Texas.
That's a great example of it.
You may think you're seeing the most significant thing in the world. Like this might be a space shuttle launch. I mean, that's because the venue, to your point, Mike, really makes all the difference.
It really
does.
It's
small, it's nitty gritty. I mean, everybody's close to the action. It completely changes the experience. Corey, if you're king for the day, right? How would you change with the eye that we've talked about and really kind of harped on here today, the vision that you have for the sport? Let's start at the NHRA, right? If you were the creative director for the NHRA's Top Fuel Funny Car Pro Show, let's include Top Fuel Funny Car and Pro Stock, even Pro Stock Motorcycle. How would you? Are there any changes you would make to how the show is presented, or how maybe first in the live event venue, but then we'll talk about the production and presentation on television second?
Yeah, I think that one of the opportunities that's there, and actually I had an opportunity to talk with Brian Loans a little bit, and it sounds like that's something they are pursuing as well, is they have not embraced the analytics side of things the way that other sports have to this point yet. And not only analytics, but from like an overlays perspective. I think that there's some really interesting graphical overlays or data that could be shown when showing replays. I think they've got some great camera angles and things along those lines. But to be able to show a blimp view or whatever and actually visualize specific things that were happening on a run. So if you think about, like, one of the metrics I was talking to him about was like an efficiency metric. So did this car, okay, so this car ran a 369, but it also drove 1,420 feet in order to get to the finish line. Well, actually, that'd be a really long way after 1,000 feet. It drove 1,100 feet. So it was only actually an 89% efficient run because of how much extra ground it covered. To be able to start showing that, to put that also on the driver, not only can this guy cut a light, but he's dominant when it comes to staying in the groove and to making the most of every single run that he does. It's like finding ways to just like put that even further, just how technical it is to make an actual perfect run down the racetrack. So I think
the visual of that would be powerful too, right? I think about JT's always watching golf, and I'm always blown away with the ball tracking. You know, I mean, you watch a Major League Baseball game, you're seeing the speed of the ball, you're seeing the trajectory of the ball, and you could apply that exact thing to drag racing, and I can just see Tony Pedregon drawing on a screen or whatever, like a green line. Look how far out of the groove he is.
There's like a race pack in every NFL player's shoulder pads these days.
Yeah.
And I mean, we've had a head start on these guys for 20 years and haven't been using the data that's clearly available. And that these guys, I mean, that literally fuels drag racing, could also be presented on TV to the masses. And so that's
clutch applications. I mean, I wonder if people are like afraid of like letting their tune up out of the bag or something, but I could see like race pack graphs being integrated into the television production, because I think that's something that is super interesting.
Really interesting. Yeah.
There's stuff too, like you think about, like from a race pack perspective. So like when you ever get into a pedal fest, you can see the exact amount of time that somebody was on and off the throttle. So did this guy let the car calm down too quick before he went into the wall, or what was the actual the process of what was going on in those certain situations, that you can, I think, really lure the video or the viewer in even more to understand just how complex it is going from A to B in any of the types of cars, whether it's fuel car, pro stock, whatever.
Yeah, I think it comes down to lack of resources, because it takes a lot of resources to do the ball tracking in money, mainly money and time and everything that goes into the investment of doing the ball tracking in golf and all the stuff we see in the NFL. And they just haven't had those resources, at their disposal to do that. So are they working on getting the resources for that, or allocating resources to getting invested in that?
From what I understand, it's something that's definitely on the radar. It is a package that Fox has that is available to NASCAR, but man, it's a pretty penny from what I understand in order to be able to access into those. But I just feel like it could open up so many doors in terms of educating fans exactly what is going on and who really is doing it better than the other person.
The thing that I think Yes, and we have to. And I actually think, Corey, that's a good one too. Is that I don't know that we're doing a good enough job talking about average reaction times. Like I find myself struggling, even because the point I'm trying to make is it would help everybody. Everybody's going to do a better job. Like your announcers, if they had access to some of that data, and we know that the technology exists to like Bluetooth to your race pack, right? I mean,
think of all the stats they have in other sports, like the announcers. You just mentioned.
Yeah, and you just don't,
and they
because you
throw out
need
these
talking
absurd
points.
stats throughout a game, right? And when someone comes up and it's
Well,
been
probably
987 games since he's
just the most off the wall shit they have at their fingertips, and we have none of that. And to me, the biggest thing that I've always seen about drag racing, even since childhood, is, hey, yeah, my dad drag races. Oh, is that where you just like push the gas and go straight?
Yes.
And that's the perception that we still have to fight.
Because any other sport, if you watch Travis Pastrana do a backflip on a dirt bike, that shit looks hard.
Right.
It looks super sketchy. I don't think there's a whole lot of people that could do it. I don't want to do it, but you compare and contrast
especially
that to
when
drag
you put
racing.
the football pads on and he did the double.
There's this stuff. I mean, it visually is more. The degree of difficulty. I don't know it's that much different. And what's always interesting, if you talk to Ken Block, the famed YouTube superstar and rallycross legend, he wants no part of a Top Fuel dragster. I mean, I guarantee you he wouldn't drive Corey's car, right? But to the casual passing motorsports fan, what he does going up a mountain or whatever looks much more difficult, looks harder. So we have to find, as a sport, we got to challenge ourselves and accept that challenge, embrace it. How can we demonstrate the nuance of our sport and the technicalities that exist within this sport? Because, I mean, it's also talking points. Like, we find ourselves, we're just saying shit and we don't really have anything to back it up. Like, I'm going, Mike Castellani, he's one of the best levers in the history of pro mod drag racing. And I'm like, I don't really know if that's true. I just know that I've seen him cut a lot of good lights and I've seen him win some whole races on hole shots, but I don't have the stats to back that up. I'm just saying stuff, right? I mean, you look at, I don't know, there's not easy access. There's not, and don't get me wrong, I believe there are people within our sport that keep track of this type of stuff, but it's not like readily available where, we can pull up.
Wouldn't it be awesome if somebody came up and you could show how efficient this one was leaving the line? I mean, you could come up with some true underdog.
When it's
stories,
not presented in a graphical format, even if it's available in a spreadsheet, it's like, holy, I'm not, digesting that.
Nobody gets that. But if you were showing, like this guy
be
is
able to
dominant
show
at this, and he's going up against this big team, and he's kind of independent over here. I mean, you could really come up with some good stuff there.
Yeah,
that's your job, Corey. We're giving you this assignment today to revolutionize drag racing.
Go ahead. Quit your job.
We're gonna go ahead and let you go so you get started on this.
That sounds good.
Don't waste any time.
Just to be able to show that type of stuff, I think, like from that efficiency standpoint, where it's like, that guy ran a 71, but if he was 10% more efficient, that was a 69, and actually now he's going to be the number 3 qualifier, and he's got a much better first round matchup because of it, and or all those other situations that just currently aren't being shown. And it just puts, I think, that much more onus on being perfect every time you go up to the starting line, because you're being evaluated as well. It's like every PGA Tour guy seeing the PXG hat that JT's wearing, every single shot that they've got on tour is monitored by a TrackMan. They've got the ball tracer, they've got the ball speed. Every single thing that's happening is on display to see where the smallest mistake was made and why it didn't get any closer to the pin.
Because golf is a technical sport where the smallest detail matters.
You should see how technical I am with it.
Yeah, but it also looks easy. It's, to me, is mostly like drag racing in that if you've never played golf, you would think, that looks pretty easy. I could do that. But see, golf is more accessible. So most people have had that thought, stepped out onto a golf course, got their ass kicked and said, yeah, that's pretty difficult. But most people haven't gone drag racing to find out how difficult it actually is.
Yep.
So it's on us as a sport to really hone in on that, I think.
So we have to, because I get frustrated with it, because I feel that drag racing, I mean, they've been drag racing since there was the second car rolled off. Like the second car was created. They're like, I wonder which one of these is faster. You know what I mean? And I mean, I don't think it's, while I completely understand and respect the fact that the barrier to entry is fairly significant, right? I mean, especially if you're going to go like drag racing at a high level, if you're going to go fuel racing or radial tire racing, but you can go to your local drag strip. There's no other motorsport. I mean, if you want to enter your daily driver in a demo derby, you're at least going to have to knock the windows out of it. Like, you know what I mean? Like, you're going to have to get a sledgehammer, blow all the glass out of it before they're going to let you enter it in demo derby. However,
That's a fun time too.
it is a fun time. But you roll up to your local drag strip in your minivan, you can run trophy, you can run the bracket class, right? I mean, you can get involved. So I get frustrated that our sport's not further along than it is for as long as there have been automobiles and as long as people have been racing them, and as easy as it is to understand in the fact that man, woman, child, young, old, every race, color, creed has experienced the thrill of getting on it, passing somebody, or pulling up to a stoplight and, not today, grandma, or whatever. Everybody's experienced it. And I think that it's frustrating because I think our sport should be further along. I can't remember who I was talking to over the weekend, but I get so frustrated that, I get it, Tony Stewart and all that he's accomplished, but I think there are plenty of people within our sport that deserve that level of stardom. I mean, I really do. I mean, I think about people like Tony Schumacher, and I think about the Larry Dixons, and I think about Erica Enders and Greg Anderson and Jeg Coughlin. And these people are incredibly talented, brave, courageous, big personalities, all those things. But the sport of drag racing hasn't served them well enough. You know what I mean? Like, we haven't done enough for them. And it comes down to stuff like you're talking about. How can we better tell this story? Because it feels to me, for all intents and purposes, we've been doing it the same way since like 1974.
Well, speaking of telling the story better, we've harped on the impact that the Netflix F1 documentary has had on that sport and its adoption here in the US. What's your take on that whole deal with Netflix? And we've heard rumors of the NHRA having talks with Netflix about something similar. What is that something that what we're talking about as far as all the stats and the graphics? Is that something that is probably more realistic for a documentary series like that rather than like a live TV broadcast? And would you, as obviously the video visionary, what's your take on the presentation of the documentary they did on the F1 deal?
Yeah, I think it's definitely more adoptable in a non-live format, just given the ability to kind of go back and do that stuff, not in real time. As far as the documentary itself, that was one of the ones that I feel like really kind of transcended the sport. Obviously, F1 is one of the biggest motorsports, if not the biggest motorsport in the world. But I've had so many people that just know, hey, you're affiliated with racing, right? Is that what you do? Or did you watch the F1? Like, so many people that did not care about anything motorsport related got invested in that series through the people, the stories, the danger, the intrigue of everything that was brought to the forefront and the drama that they created within there. And if it does end up happening from an NHR perspective, could be one of the biggest things that's happened to the sport in a long time from a media perspective, just because of the opportunity to get in front of people that we just traditionally don't. And we really need to, like Wes, what you were saying, I hope that an Erica Enders, I hope that some of these people that truly have a lot to offer outside of being just unbelievable race car drivers can show just how crazy the sport is and how much opportunity there is for other people to get involved with it, whether it's from a sponsorship standpoint, fandom, whatever. There's some really good things that are going on.
In the sudden death nature of our sport, the amount of times you win and lose, I mean, there's just so many opportunities for storylines, crushing defeats, whole shot losses. I mean, there are stories that could be told in that format that I'm covered in goosebumps. It's the most exciting thing to think about. This person had the faster car. Yeah. Right. But they still lost. I mean, there's the human element, the team that exists. There's so many opportunities, I think, to tell those stories. If you had, going back to my king for the day question, if we table the analytic aspect of it, what do you think about just the pageantry and like the presentation of human beings in our sport? The original slogan of the NHRA, where the cars are the stars, something has always kind of made my stomach turn, because I just don't believe that to be the case. I think our stars are Corey Mahalik. I think our stars are the men and women behind the wheel. And at times, the people tuning on these cars and working on those cars, I really think that they're You don't see basketballs and footballs on the cover of Sports Illustrated, right? You see the people that play the sports, that dribble them and throw them, right? And our sport has never really leaned that way. It's been much more about the machine than the man. What would you change to the presentation of each individual driver if you had the opportunity, Corey? Like when it comes to the TV package or the live event venue?
Yeah, one of the favorite things, and you guys have mentioned this event multiple times, that we do each year because of the way that it really treats the racers is Bill Bader's Night Under Fire event. He takes that and just, I mean, it's I think it's catered to a different type of fan. Like he's got the NHRA fan that comes to the national event in June, but when he hosts his own event in August, literally blows the roof off the place. By the way that he promotes the people that are involved, what they are doing, the overall show aspect of it. Never makes it on TV whatsoever. But I'll tell you what, it literally changes people's lives in terms of that one night that they were able to go attend that. And it's the pre-race parade. It's the interviews. It's the flyover that he pays for out of his own pocket. When you're at that racetrack and you've got 4 B-57s flying over top while there's fireworks shooting off, you're like, what is going on right now? This is one of the, like, you feel like you're at the Daytona 500. There's people stomping their feet after the national anthem, and there's like 4 deep at the fence. Like, when you can create that type of hype around, where you were even mentioning Midwest Drag Racing Series, where the alcohol funny cars felt like these guys were like a spaceship or whatever. There's gassers up there that people are, the entire stands are standing before they even pre-stage because they're waiting to see who's going to win that race. And it's just like, when you got people like that just truly love the sport as much as I think all of us do, and they're invested in it to bring out the biggest show possible, it shows that people can really get invested in it.
I couldn't agree more, man. I think we all owe like the Bader family like a debt of gratitude. And I wish that level of showmanship, because I think that the NHRA is at a unique point where, and actually I've had conversations with people within the NHRA, like whenever they've asked me to like announce or whatever, they're quick to tell you like, hey, this is a professional sport, and we want to be presented. We want to present as a professional sport. And I'm listening the whole time, but I'm also thinking like, I know that we're a professional sport, but I do think we could use a little screaming and yelling. Like, I do think we could use a little WWE. I think we could use a touch of pro wrestling. And I understand that, like, there's a fine line. How much of a challenge is it? And I'm just curious. You've done a ton of videos, and we'll let you go after this, Corey. Thank you for being so generous with your time. I do want to remind everybody here before we get our last question in with A-Fuel superstar, React 104's own Corey Mahalik. I'd like to remind everybody that the Wes Buck Show is brought to you by our friends at Redline Synthetic Oils. Redline has a reputation with racers and hardcore enthusiasts for creating products that perform and protect better than anyone on the market. And they've been doing it since 1979. Whether it's your race car, your tow rig, your motorcycle, or your lawnmower, when you think about lubricants, you need to think about Redline. For more information, log on to redlineoil.com. Corey, I think it's been a ton of fun talking to you here. But one of the things that I've noticed, especially, I don't think there was any better example of it, the challenges that the Fox and the NHRA production teams face is willing participants. One of the things that I noticed with the NHRA All-Star Top Fuel call-out that went down at the NHRA Gator Nationals, and granted, it was hampered by weather, and there was a lot of other extenuating circumstances that didn't help matters, but I also felt like, man, this was a classic round peg, square hole, square peg, round hole thing. You're putting all these people that are not pro wrestlers, that have never, that likely have very little media training or any desire to be the Ultimate Warrior or Hulk Hogan or Andre the Giant, right? I do feel at times maybe we're expecting a lot of them because they're not really comfortable doing this. This is, have you encountered that, like, in as often as you've stuck a camera in people's face, maybe even from other walks of your life, like outside of the motorsports realm? Do you recognize that as a significant hurdle, that it takes a willing dance partner to do these type of things we're talking about?
I think it does. The majority of the stuff, at least from a racing perspective, that I've done in terms of filming has been on the NHRA side of things. And there is a good amount of corporate backing that goes into that. And I think that there is a little bit of fear at times, just in terms of the way that things could be taken out of context. And a lot of those rivalries that maybe are discussed back in the pits and things along those lines don't come as much to the forefront when it comes to actually putting stuff out there publicly. I do think that, as you guys have mentioned multiple times in the past, that this year, now that there are a lot of individual team owners in that situation, it's going to open up the opportunity for it to potentially come out more than it has in the past. But I personally have not run into many of those situations. I unfortunately also did not see much of the Top Fuel call up, just given our participation in that event. Was there any type of sort of tension within those moments? Or
it felt like, and I don't mean this from a at all negative, just being honest, it kind of felt to me like it fell flat. Like it just, there was all this buildup initially, and there was all this talk and all this hype about it. And we were especially involved in that. We were ranting and raving about it constantly. And then it felt like we get there, and I mean, everybody's kind of like trying to, tiptoe, and it felt like cat on a hot tin roof.
Like, let's get this over with.
Yeah, like, let's get this over with.
I thought it went okay. I did. I mean, I didn't think it was. I mean, I think it needs tweaked a little bit, and I think that everybody will play into it the more you do it.
Yeah. It was like an awkward first time type.
And maybe that's what it was. But I do think that willing participant thing is a big part of this, because, and JT and Mike would know better than I, but like, isn't it a kind of a thing nobody wants to do, to be on Hard Knocks, the HBO show?
Yeah,
like, nobody wants to be on the HBO's NFL show because they don't want everything being recorded, and they don't want to be on camera, and it's a distraction.
Some do, some don't. Some do, some don't. And I think you're going to get that with anything.
I would say all we hear about in the last 5 years or so is like, whoever draws the short straw gets Hard Knocks. Like, people don't want it because in their eyes, for their team, it's not worth what the distractions are.
At the same time, we've seen the Chiefs come out with the franchise, which is almost their own Hard Knocks show.
Right.
They have a sponsor for it, and it's literally almost exactly like the Hard Knocks show, and it's in depth, and it goes not only in training camp, like it goes throughout the season, and it's awesome.
But they can control the narrative of that.
They can control the narrative of that. Yeah.
And Amazon did one as well. And I guess there's different approaches to it, but I think we've seen. But it's to your point, Wes. Though, I mean, you're making a good analogy here, because the team doesn't want to participate because they see it as a personal drawback, instead of what it could do for the greater good of the sport.
And that's where getting people to buy in on the big picture and the vision is probably the biggest challenge.
Do you know
my son is big on the F1 stuff? It's been actually really cool. And
and I wasn't an F1 fan before that show.
A little anecdotal thing is, it's been about the most exciting thing for me that I've experienced is that in a long time is my little boy. He's getting ready to turn 14. He is a freaking F1 fanatic. Max. And it all started with Netflix. I mean, he watched that, and he's watched every episode. He plays the video game nonstop. He's on the websites. Like, he lives for Formula One. And it's been such a cool thing to see him get passionate about it, and to see that passion fueled by a reality show and a video game is very interesting to me. And I think there's a hell of a big lesson for like the whole world as to how important those things are. But he told me that Max Verstappen, the reigning Formula One world champion, opted out of the Netflix docu-series or whatever.
First year, right?
Because he didn't like the way they would repurpose audio clips. They would use audio that was at different times, and he didn't like the way things were presented. So you've got your reigning champion opting out.
For this year? So he's opted out for this year?
Yeah, and it's... So anyways...
I just binge-watched the whole thing. Yeah, maybe he wasn't in it much, I don't think.
Lewis Hamilton was not in the first season very much.
That's he wasn't in the first one.
And I think that he opted out or got himself out of it somehow. And I think, the response that it got, and by the time it came around for the second season,
then he felt left out.
Yeah, then he was like, let me get in this now, bro. Like, he saw
because all these people
he saw the
Carlos
power,
Sands or whatever.
He saw the power of that show and the new fans, I'm sure. And to that point, how powerful like a show is, like say Hard Knocks. It's so powerful that they can take some scrub that probably isn't even going to make the practice squad, okay? And they're gonna follow this guy, show his inside story and stuff, and every freaking fan out there that's watched this show is pulling for this cat.
Yep.
And
That's
this
a great-
cat isn't even going to make
Yeah.
the practice squad.
That's a great point
know?
for what it could do to someone up and coming in drag racing.
Yeah.
It doesn't get all of the glory and doesn't get all the attention that the big names get. And what a show like that could do by just focusing on that struggle of that person to even get to the track, to
'Cause
qualify.
you've
because
related
that's
Is
the
there
same
any
as Matt, right?
examples,
Yeah.
T, of and Mike, you may know this as well, and I just have no idea. Are there any examples of people that have been on those shows that were like highlighted on a team that went on to become like huge, like very successful?
Oh yeah, I think yeah.
I mean, because I
Yeah,
wonder.
you
I
have
mean,
to
I
go
wonder if
back.
anybody's
You have to
paying
go back.
attention.
There's
Yeah.
Okay,
a
is
lot of
anybody
rookies
paying
and a lot
attention
of
to?
guys that come in from the draft and stuff like that. So yeah.
So you
for
have a
sure.
guy that comes in and is introduced to the masses on Hard Knocks, right? I wonder how much of an
trying to think
impact
of
that
one.
has on like merch sales, because I bet if
Oh,
he
yeah.
actually makes the team and he goes on to have a promising future or goes on to have like a pretty successful career, you know that
because it's
that
still
visibility, that viewership or whatever, that reach, it's going to affect everything else that happens to him for the
they
rest of
don't-
his career.
they don't leave out their stars and they don't leave out their draft picks and stuff coming in. But it's funny, they always do grab, a guy or two down here from the depths of nowhere.
Because they want the drama of
Because
a
it's the
guy that's
interesting
probably
story.
going to get
Well,
cut.
it's something else for someone to relate to. Like
Yeah.
they love these guys already. These guys are already stars. If you follow that team, you're already bought into those guys. But we're going to grab these guys here and you're going to relate to them. We're going to try to make this guy a hero. If he does make it, holy shit, right? We just, we called our shot basically.
Yeah.
Yep.
It's an interesting thing, man. It really is. Well, Corey, seriously, buddy, thank you so much for being a part of this. Thanks for joining us.
The dog just
guys,
came in and said time
Yeah,
to
the
go.
dog just come in
Yeah.
and said, Pops, it's
Like
time to
some-
bounce.
No, I appreciate you guys having me on. I love what you guys are doing. Like I said at the beginning of this, it's really cool to be able to be a part of the conversation. And also I appreciate you highlighting some of the work and stuff that I've done in terms of the video stuff. I'm looking forward to being able to do a little bit more this year, and definitely we'll be sharing it all with you, and hoping to see you guys out at the racetrack. So thanks again.
What's
Thank
the
you
best
for
way
watching,
everybody
man.
can
It's
check
so-
out your
it's
stuff?
so well done.
You give us
like,
your handles or your links or whatever. What's the best way for people to check out your stuff?
Sure. Yeah. So all the videos are posted on YouTube under the name React 104. You can see any of the PDRA, the NHRA, and other work that's on there. And like I said, that should be doing the PDRA season opener at Galat this year. Really excited about going down there for that. And now it sounds like there may be some opportunities as well to maybe go out and do a few NHRA races here and there as well. So looking forward to it, and hopefully just continuing to add on to what you guys are doing in terms of showing the sport in a different way and getting people excited. And if we can get a few more people in the stands, then I think we're all doing our jobs.
Yes, sir, man. From your mouth to God's ears, brother. Thank you so much, Corey. Ladies and gentlemen, Corey Mahalik. Yeah, man. Woo.
Thanks,
Come
guys.
on, give me some claps. Somebody's got to clap. I'm getting
I
I'm getting a button. That's what's going to happen next.
we're
I'm
going to
getting
have to
one
get
of
a
those.
button.
We're going to
Thanks,
have to get a
Corey.
button. Thanks,
Thanks,
Corey.
Corey.
All right, guys, we're headed into we're like running down. We're headed toward the scoreboards. We're headed towards the finish line. Like we're about to get the chutes out. I do want to. Is there anything that we didn't talk about that we were in our notes to talk about, guys?
Texas 2K.
Oh yeah. Well, interesting thing, man. I don't know how much of our audience are hardcore, street strip guys, but I just look at the crowd. I can't help but feel good about the sport of drag racing. Have you guys seen some of the photos that were posted from Houston Raceway Park this past weekend? I mean, there was like a near capacity crowd at that joint on Saturday, and it's just massively impressive, and it makes me feel good. It makes me feel good that the sport is succeeding on so many different levels, right? We beat the Street Outlaws No Prep Kings thing to death. We talked about the crowd that was on hand, jaw-dropping crowd at the NHRA National event at the Gator Nationals. And then I go, man, these guys are racing Lambos and Audi R8s and all these exotic cars, and
If
the
you're a
stands are packed
motorsports
full of
guy,
people,
though,
man.
you can go there. It's like a one-stop shop, right? I mean,
Yeah.
you get to see a little bit of everything.
Yeah, true.
And some exotics that you probably never will see anywhere else.
And you
right?
There was a
won't see again
Lamborghini
because
that
you-
went
because a lot of them got
233
wadded
miles
up.
an hour. Yeah, there was a
Yeah.
lot of carnage.
You won't
this
see him
weekend.
again.
Yeah,
Yeah,
you're not
there
going to
was
see
a
them
lot of
again. A
carnage.
lot of them got wadded up, man.
And we've
What's your
seen it.
take on that?
There's a
Are we
lot of
gonna
talk
see-
about that.
Yeah, we're going to see some changes on that deal because it was pretty eye-opening.
I had an interesting conversation with Seth Angel, the owner of Houston Raceway Park on Monday. And I called him on Tuesday because I wanted to give him a little bit of time to decompress from what I'm sure was a rough
Putting-
weekend at
Putting his
the
wall back in
office.
place.
Yeah, man. He mentioned it's kind of funny because not funny that anybody crashed, but he felt like this is par for the course. Like he goes, man, this event is still in its growth stages. Like this whole scene is still in its growth stages. And I think people fail to, remember that, there was a time when pro mods wrecked pretty much every time they went to the starting line. We don't see that so much anymore. It wasn't that long ago that every NHRA national event that featured a pro mod included a crash, an oil down, something bad, something dramatic.
Because they put safety measures in place afterwards.
Well, and
right?
it evolved, right? It just evolved and gets better. And he pointed to that, like, hey, man, we're early in this process. Like, it's not, Texas 2K has been around for a while. It's not, it's not in its infancy, but the cars are getting faster. Everything is kind of escalating rapidly. And he just made the point that, hey, man, I feel like some of this stuff is just growing pains that we're having as this event gets more and more serious. Plus, another point that Seth made is that there are people that don't race all year long. 51 weekends out of the year, they're not racing, they're doing something else, but they've got a car that they're building for this weekend. And that's another thing that I feel like drag racing has lost. There's only a couple of those events. The one that always stood proud to me was the World Street Nationals at Orlando Speed World Dragway, right? Down at Ozzy Moya's joint. Before Ozzy Moya, Carl Weisinger hosted the World Street Nationals. And there were people, you would go to that event and see cars that you didn't see anywhere else or any other time, because a bunch of guys pooled their resources, got together. I've got a car, you've got a big block Chevy, I've got 74 bottles of nitrous or a screw blower or whatever. We'll all contribute and we're going to the World Street Nationals. And it was more about, it was this Super Bowl thing that everybody worked towards. That's what they have right now with the Texas 2K event. That is an event. Most of those cars won't see action anywhere else. If they do, it's very limited. Everybody kind of saves their stuff for that. And that's what he pointed to. He goes, man, there are shops here.
We saw that.
Years will be built around the success that happens here. Like if their cars go out and set all the records, they're going to be busy all year long. So they're going out there, leaving nothing on the table. Everybody's stuff, if the dial goes to 10 at Texas 2K, you're turning it to 11 or 12. And when you have that kind of environment, you're going to have some carnage. I definitely think it went over center, obviously, and it was.
I think a parachute. I think like a mandatory single parachute could solve 90% of what we saw out there. Don't you think?
Well, but I think it's also drivers that don't. And I don't mean to be
Wes,
negative.
We saw this.
Yes.
We've been to these events before. We've seen guys that have too much money and not enough experience, and they can't even back their fucking car in to the water box. Like,
you know what? I'm going to give a huge.
I mean, they went right over the top of cones and everything. I mean, it's just amazing that they.
I would love to see one of these events. There's a couple of takeaways I have for it. Seth Angel, and I hope this isn't like proprietary information. He goes, but I'm going to tell you, he told me this. He goes, I can take all my ticket sales. He goes, I have a lot of information about my NHRA ticket sales, and I have a lot of information about my Texas 2K information or ticket sales. He goes, there is zero overlap, like zero. These are two completely different groups of people. So the first thing that flies into my head is going, man, how does the NHRA or how does traditional drag racing get their arms around this thing? Because there's this huge us versus them. There's this huge divide, right. Two different worlds, and maybe you can't mesh them, but man, I can't help but think that a guy who's spending $400,000, $500,000 on a twin turbo Lamborghini with a billet Pro Line motor in it that runs 200 some on, he could certainly go pro mod racing. Like, can he run with Stevie Fast? Doubtful, right? But he could be, that kind of investment, if he knew there was an opportunity, he may not even know it exists, right? When you think about the fact that these two ticket buying audiences, there's no overlap, that's a head scratcher for me. But I do think that the thing that could happen that would be positive is to see one of these events work with like someone like Frank Hawley, right? Maybe pay whatever it would take to bring Frank in and, hey, we're going to have a driver seminar on Thursday that's mandatory. If you've never raced with us before or what, I just think there's some ways that we could leverage they always say, and this is a funny one that I enjoy using a lot, right? They say experience is like the best teacher, right? Have you heard that before? Like the best way to learn something is to do it yourself, trials and tribulations. And it doesn't have to be your experience. right? We can learn from other people's experiences, right? And a lot of people resist that, but there's a lot of truth to it. I mean, if we didn't do that, there'd be a whole lot more accidents and dead people and tragedies and whatnot, because we do learn from the experiences of others. And I think that if somebody could come into that scene and offer some of that knowledge, because to counter your point on the parachutes, Mike, I don't know that everyone that's driving these cars that are going over 150 miles an hour know that that's a great way to save the car if it's starting to move around.
Well, not even just to save, just to slow
stop
down.
it. Yeah. I mean, they don't think they have to.
The majority of the problems that I saw were just simply slowing the car down and just totally preventable. But
and also how to use the brakes on your car. Do you even know that your car's got carbon fiber brakes on it? And if you mat this pedal, they're probably going to get hot and lock up, right?
I think wasn't it crazy conditions there too? So it was cool.
Good conditions.
I think it was windy a little bit. Also,
big crosswind.
Yeah, and again, don't write it off just because of that one event. Let's see what happens. But I think there's more eyeballs
for a while too.
No, I know. I mean, but just it's the start of the year. There's more eyeballs on that series right now too, or on that race. Yes. I feel like there was more talk, regardless of the crashes, about that event this year. We talked to several longtime advertising guys in the industry that were going there. Their eyeballs on that scene and on that race in particular. And I think that exposure, the more of us that are watching it, we're scrutinizing it more than we ever have.
Well, here's a classic example of there being no such thing as bad publicity. There's a great quote from our long lost brother, the one and only Tom McEwen, God rest his soul, the mongoose. He famously said, "There's no such thing as bad ink," right? And I think this is an example of all that, the crashes and all that stuff. It's bad. We hate it. Nobody wants to see anybody tear up anything. Nobody wants to see anybody get hurt. But at the same time, it also has everybody talking. It had everybody paying attention. Keith Haney mentioned this to me about the Midwest Drag Racing Series event. It's no secret that there was some drama at Extreme Raceway Park. There was a couple of issues on the starting line. I believe Taylor Laster, well-known nitrous racer. It's been around the pro mod and radial tire scene for a long time, Outlaw 10.5 scene for a long time. Taylor was shut off and shouldn't have been shut off. And there was a meltdown on the starting line and a meltdown on social media. And Keith Haney told me, he goes, "Man, I'll be the first to admit we made the wrong call. I went over and I apologized to him. He's upset. I get it. I would be upset too. It's a bummer of a deal and we don't want to see that happen." But he also told me, he goes, "Man, I also recognize that it's going to make for great TV. Like it makes those moments it's horrible. Nobody wants to see that happen.
And they'll learn from it for next time.
And you absolutely learn from it. But like he said, he goes, "Man, everybody's talking about it." And so it's not, you have to find ways to spin that stuff positive, and it does get people talking. And it's funny because there have been some instances, I think about, the PDRA, they'll have a near perfect event. Great weather, no issues, everything's done on time, where everybody's drinking cocktails come 6:00 Saturday night or whatever, the race is over. And it's crickets online because things went too smoothly,
Yeah.
But if they would have had an oil down or two and they wouldn't have got the finals run till midnight or 1 a.m., everybody on social media would have been talking about it. And this is when, unfortunately, the kind of negative side of technology in the world.
Bad news travels fast.
Bad news travels fast.
Just another version of that. People can't wait to get on there and talk about.
We're hardwired to do it. We don't realize that it's a safety mechanism. Like, we're not that much different than our ancestors. Really, we're not. And it's how we protect one another. It's how we protect ourselves, by spreading bad news. We can't even help it. It happens sometimes subconsciously.
What is it like? You'll tell, if you have a bad experience, you'll tell like 24 people. If you have a good experience, you'll tell like 3 or something. Yeah. It's something crazy like that. But back to these fast cars and people that, whether they can or can't drive them, or the conditions, who knows? But man, me and you've talked about this. Like, there's production cars out there that it amazes me that you can even go to a lot and go buy one of these things and drive off of there without some type of course.
Now's maybe a pretty good opportunity. I've seen so many videos of these Tesla Plaid editions.
Oh,
I saw one the other day.
Jumping through the air.
Yeah, the one jumping through the air was really terrifying and sketchy. I don't know if that was a Tesla Plaid, but I watched one yesterday. It was a short video on Facebook Reels, and it was a Tesla Plaid going 0 to 115. And I thought to myself, in this thing, these cars get it, right? They're like 9-second, single-digit quarter-mile cars. personally don't know any, but very few, if anybody, that owns a Tesla that needs to be running 9s in the quarter mile, like in a car that's capable of that.
And how much do those things weigh? Don't they weigh an absolute shit ton?
Probably.
They have to with those batteries, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's what I think was
so now
impressive
you got a
about
150
that
car
about the
flying
one
through the
flying
air.
through the air is he couldn't stop. I mean, it's gone. He couldn't stop it.
You know what
How about
that told me?
The Silverado in the tornado.
Yeah,
Wow.
there you go.
Yeah.
So
The heartbeat of America, today's Chevrolet, baby.
Yeah,
that
yeah.
was. I hope
JT
that's a commercial soon.
They sold some trucks off that.
Yeah,
They
JT
did.
feels good about his truck now after seeing that.
But
It
how
was
much
better.
does it
I don't
tell
know.
you that how different is the Tesla culture? Because it could be a whole debate, and we won't go that far because we are headed into our Q&A session of the show. Real quick, I do want to remind everybody, thank you guys. Without your involvement, without your comments, without your likes, shares, everything, helping us spread the message of drag racing, we couldn't do this, and if we did, it wouldn't be any fun. You guys make it's great to have Corey Mahalik. It's great to have these big name guests, but the most important guest is each and every one of you. So thank you from the bottom of my heart on behalf of Mike, JT, the whole gang at Drag Illustrated. We genuinely appreciate your involvement. It makes all the difference in the world. All of our sponsors, Sand Haulers of America, Elite HP, Redline Synthetic Oils, Stroud Safety. Thank you guys for your belief and your support. Flow Racing. It's been amazing to see how this whole deal has taken off and what it's turned into. I got to tell you guys what I took away from that Tesla launch video, which is like a really big topic, right? I mean, there's a lot of people talking about it.
Just to follow up, a Tesla Plaid weighs 5,390 pounds.
Okay. Are Tesla people car people? Like, there's nobody with their 67 Mustang, nobody with their 69 Camaro. I don't care how viral the video is going to go, is going to ramp it. You know what I mean? Like, we just care too much about it. And I just think that video, to me, told me, Tesla, that's not a car guy. Like, nobody that really cared, that really had the relationship that I think the three of us and most of the people that we run with had, the relationship that they have with their vehicle, just would never allow that type of sacrifice. Right? I mean, unless it's for like a Hollywood production. Unless
it didn't seem like the people that were standing around videoing it or anything, I don't know if they even expected that to happen. And they just didn't look like car people.
I didn't see any of the people, but it just told me that
we always say this too. Like, if you watch YouTube reviews or whatever of Tesla, it's usually like tech guys, like that review a MacBook Pro and then their Tesla Plaid that Tesla gave them.
There wasn't one guy with a black hoodie in that crowd.
Yeah, I mean, you don't even have your radial tire or starter.
I didn't see a Precision Turbo sweatshirt at all. So that tells me.
But Dion actually just made our producer here just made a point too, that like, what's the difference between ramping your Tesla and like tearing up your race car? But I will tell you, there's two types of drag racers. There are types of drag racers that have like a really unique relationship with their car, and they clean it all the time, and it's always mint. And if you lean up against it or scratch it with a Zeus tool, you're going to be murdered. That's my dad. That's my drag racing experience. However, you also at times can go to the racetrack and you'll see a car covered in handprints and all dirty, because that's a racer who sees the car as a tool. Right. Yeah. I remember the first time Warren Johnson's cars, I'm not saying they were rough or anything, but it was not at all surprising to see one of WJ's Pro Stock cars go to the starting line with handprints all over it and clutched up dirty.
If you get up close to some of the quickest cars out there, you would be shocked at how
they're kept
dirty, and because
they see it as a tool,
and this thing is out of there at the end of the season. I mean, they're not attached to this thing at all. That's the way it is, at least especially in modern times, I think. But yeah, to your point, back then they used to keep cars longer as well, and I think
that's a good point too.
You'd see guys somewhere in between. But
do you think that that's part of the problem? Because I had this conversation earlier with somebody. I was talking to one of my racing buddies, and we were talking about the highest levels of drag racing. To some extent, it has become as much about how much you're willing to sacrifice as anything else. Like, are you willing? How many times have we heard Stevie Fast Jackson say that he ran the rods out of it?
Yeah.
You'll never, ever, ever hear anybody in my family say that, right? Because they had too much of a connection to it to tear it up. Don Garlitz, that was one of Big Daddy's go-tos, is how do we fix the sport? How do we slow down, curtail the spending, race the engine you qualify with, right? I mean, things like that where you're not allowed I mean, you're getting DQ'd, right? If you can't make the call in a certain amount of time, or if you don't run the engine that you I do think about that because we see it more and more and more. I talked to racers this weekend that were at the Extreme Raceway Park at the Midwest Drag Racing Series event, and you're seeing cars with the heads off. You're seeing guys doing like serious maintenance between rounds. I can make a case for that being problematic because there is a whole world of racers that are not prepared to make those kind of sacrifices or swing a motor between rounds. But it's very hard to intermingle those two groups of people, right? I mean, it's a really big challenge. JT, do we have any cool questions or any things that we need to dive into, or are we going to wrap things up?
I think we can go and wrap things up, man.
Okay, guys. I mean, we got a ton of cool stuff going on this weekend. I remind everybody that the Funny Car Chaos is going down at the Funny Car Chaos Classic is going down at the Texas Motorplex this coming weekend. Massive event. If you're in the area, make sure you check it out. We also have, of course, Sweet 16 5.0, Donald Long's huge event, a private kind of underground happening down in Valdosta, Georgia, at South Georgia Motorsports Park. We got the racing seasons kind of in full swing, guys. We got things happening left, right, all the way around us. Where are we headed next? What's the next event we're all going to? I guess you've got NHRA Charlotte coming up, Mike. JT, you and I were going to try to go to LSX Fest West in Vegas, I think.
Yeah, Nate will be at the Galat season opener.
I'm going to come out for that as well.
Okay.
PDRA season opener. Got to be there, right?
Did I say Galat season opener?
Well, I knew what you meant.
PDRA season opener at Galat.
We got some great PDRA news coming up.
My brain, I'm a single tasker, man. Brain just shuts off when I'm reading here.
It's true.
It's all good. It's hard, man. It's hard
if
to
he's
read
checking
stuff.
His text messages, you might as well not even talk to him. Then you completely get done with the conversation and just look at you like this. There you go. What? Anyway, shit, man. I ain't repeating that whole damn conversation.
Yeah, man. You know.
Are you making fun of me?
No, well, both really.
Oh, okay.
But no, Mike's the worst though.
He's reading text message. He can't do anything else.
One thing at a time, man. One thing at a time here.
My goodness, guys. Well, hey, thank you all so much for being a part of it. Please be sure to like, share, help us spread the message, spread the gospel of drag racing. Thanks for being a part of it. We will see you next Wednesday at 2 p.m. Central Standard Time right here on the Drag Illustrated YouTube channel and Facebook page. Mike, thanks a bunch. JT, thanks a bunch. Dion, buddy, thanks for being here. We will see you guys very, very soon.
Thanks, everybody.
Yep. Have a good one.